The Decoy Effect. Ever wonder why some choices just feel like the smarter move, even when you never planned to make them in the first place? Let me show you how that happens without you even noticing. You walk into a movie theater. You want popcorn. Small is $4, large is $7. Then there's a medium one priced at $6.50. You pause. Medium feels pointless. Why would anyone pay $6.50 when the large is only 50 cents more? So you go for the large. You feel clever, like you hacked the system. But you didn't. You walked into a trap. The medium popcorn was never meant to be sold. It was bait, a setup, a decoy. Its only job was to make the large popcorn look like a better deal. It shifted your thinking from should I spend money on popcorn to which size should I get. That little nudge made your brain stop questioning the purchase and start comparing the options they wanted you to compare. That is the decoy effect, and it is one of the most common tricks used to steer your decisions while making you feel in control. You did not choose the large popcorn because it was better. You chose it because it was framed that way. The decoy, the medium one, was never about being chosen. It was there to guide you without force, and it works ridiculously well because it speaks directly to your logic center, the part of your brain that wants to feel smart, strategic, like you outwitted the menu. But the joke's on us, because the entire thing was designed to make that specific option look appealing. They create a weak option on purpose, so the one they want you to pick stands out. It is not just a trick of pricing. It is a trick of perception. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. You are not immune to it. In fact, if you pride yourself on being a smart shopper, you are even more likely to fall for it. The decoy effect plays on your confidence. It gives you a fake sense of control by making one option look clearly smarter than the rest. So you feel good. You feel efficient. But the decision was never really yours. It was framed for you. Let me give you a real example that costs more than a movie snack. You are shopping for a new tablet. One model is basic, costs $300. Another model has everything you want, top specs, perfect design, for $600. Then you see a third one, $570. That one is almost as good as the premium model, but missing a few key features. Now suddenly, spending $600 does not feel like a splurge. It feels like a smart upgrade. Only $30 more for way more value. You convince yourself you made a clever choice. But that middle tablet, that was the plant. That was the one placed there to drive you toward the expensive one. That is the trap, and it is everywhere. Airline upgrades, gym memberships, coffee sizes, software subscriptions, streaming services, car packages, even restaurant menus. Ever see a dish on the menu priced way higher than everything else? That overpriced item is often a decoy to make the second, most expensive dish look reasonable. You are not making free decisions. You are choosing between illusions. The scary part is that it does not feel manipulative. It feels logical. That is why it works. Your brain is constantly scanning for value. But it needs a reference point. And if they control the reference points, they control the conclusion. It is not a con. It is a structure. You are not evaluating the product. You are evaluating the setup. And here is what stings. Even when you know about the decoy effect, it still works. Just being aware of it does not stop it from influencing you. That is how deep it runs. Your brain is wired to respond to contrast, not truth, just contrast. So what can you do? You pause. You ask yourself, would I still want this option if the middle one did not exist? Would I still pay for this if I never saw the comparison? That is the test. Because if an option only looks good next to something worse, it is not good. It is just dressed up. The decoy effect is not evil. It is just powerful. And it is used all the time, not just in business, but in persuasion, in politics, in arguments, even in relationships. Think about someone offering you two choices, one totally unappealing, one that seems just okay. You think you picked the okay one, but did you? Or did they make the bad one on purpose just to push you toward the one they wanted? Yeah, that is the real mind game. Once you start noticing it, you will see it everywhere. And the more you pay attention, the harder it becomes to be nudged. Because now you are not reacting. You are choosing, not comparing, not falling for the setup. Actually deciding for you. And when that happens, the trap stops working. They cannot trick a mind that is watching. So next time something feels like a smart choice, ask yourself one question. Was that my idea, or did someone put that decoy there just to make me think it was? Gradual commitment, boiling frog. You do not wake up one day and decide to give up your boundaries. It happens slowly, one small yes at a time. And by the time you notice what you have given up, you are too deep to walk away without burning everything down. That is gradual commitment. The boiling frog, the slow trap. And it works because it never feels like a trap. It feels like progress. It feels like choice. If you drop a frog into boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in room temperature water and turn up the heat 1 degree at a time, it stays. It adjusts. It rationalizes the discomfort until it cannot escape. People are not frogs, but our brains work in the exact same way when it comes to change. We tolerate tiny shifts. We adapt. We convince ourselves it is not a big deal. And by the time we realize how far things have gone, it feels too late to undo it. So we stay. We comply. We commit harder. This is how control is built. Not with a slam, with a whisper. You see it in manipulative relationships. It never starts with control. It starts with charm, support. Little boundaries get pushed. You stay quiet. You want to keep the peace. You want to be understanding. Then one day you look around, and you are not allowed to make your own choices anymore. But it never felt like one moment. It felt like 1,000 tiny ones that slowly shifted the rules. This is the tactic. You make someone agree to one thing, then another, then another. Each request is only slightly more than the last, just a little more time, just a little more money, just a small sacrifice, just this once. But those small sacrifices add up. They build momentum. And that momentum creates a sense of commitment, a need to justify what you have already invested. Because once you have said yes 5 times, saying no the 6th time feels like betrayal, like inconsistency, and nobody wants to feel like they are going backwards. So they keep moving forward, even if the path leads to discomfort, even if it leads to control. Marketers use this too. You click on a free trial, then you give your email, then your card. Then you realize the features you want are locked behind a paywall. But by now you are already invested. You already set it up. You already learned the interface. So you pay. Not because it is worth it, but because it is easier than starting over. The power of gradual commitment is not in the request. It is in the sequence of requests. Each one looks harmless, but together they move you far from where you began. And the deeper you go, the more pressure you feel to stay. You start telling yourself stories. That you are loyal. That you are patient. That things will get better. That this is just a phase. These are not lies. They are psychological armor. Your brain wants to protect you from the pain of regret. So it rewrites the story. That is how people stay in toxic jobs, in manipulative groups, in one-sided friendships, because leaving would mean admitting that all those small yeses added up to something harmful, and that is a brutal thing to face. So we stay, and it works in reverse too. Ever try to change your habits overnight? Go cold turkey, burn the bridge, your brain resists. Because it is not how we are built. We do not like hard jumps. We like smooth transitions. So the same mechanism that traps us can also free us, if we understand it. This is not about being naive. It is about being human. We all want to be consistent. We all want to believe our decisions were smart. So we keep doubling down to avoid the feeling that we were wrong. But here is the truth. You were not stupid for saying yes the first time. The trap is not the first ask. It is the slope that follows. The question is not why did I agree back then? The question is, how far from myself am I willing to go before I stop agreeing? Gradual commitment is not always used for manipulation. It is also how we build skills, how we grow confidence, how we shift habits. It is neutral. It is a process. The danger is when someone else is turning the heat up and we are too numb to notice. So how do you spot it? Ask yourself, if I saw the full picture on day one, would I still say yes? If the end result was revealed from the start, would I agree to the journey? Because that is what gradual commitment hides. It hides the ending. It shows you one step, then the next. And before you know it, you are somewhere you never planned to be. And you are calling it progress just to survive the story. So stop, step back, zoom out. Look at the pattern, not the moment. Because if the heat feels normal now, maybe it is not because you are fine with it. Maybe it is because you forgot what cold water feels like. Pseudo-Choice Illusion. You think you are choosing. That is the illusion. You are standing in front of two doors. You pick the one that feels right. You feel empowered, independent, in control. But what if both doors lead to the exact same room? That is pseudo-choice. The illusion of freedom. The feeling of control without actually having any. And it is one of the most dangerous tricks because it feels so good. We crave choice. It makes us feel human. It gives us identity. Nobody wants to feel trapped, so the best way to control people is not by removing their choices. It is by designing the choices so that every path leads exactly where they want you to go. Let me show you how deep this goes. You are shopping online. A website asks you to pick between two plans. One is called Essential. The other is Premium. You compare. You click Premium. Feels like your choice. But you never asked whether you needed any of this to begin with. You only chose between the two options they gave you. It is like walking into a restaurant that only sells two sandwiches. They ask you chicken or beef. You say beef. You feel like you made the call. But you never decided to eat a sandwich. That was already chosen for you. This trick is everywhere. Politics, marketing, education, work, even your personal life. People offer you limited choices that make you feel like you are participating, when really you are just reacting to a setup. They give you a box and let you choose how to decorate the inside. But you are still stuck in the box. The most common version of this is the yes or yes technique. Parents do it with kids. Want to wear the red shirt or the blue one. Not wearing a shirt was never on the table. Managers do it at work. Do you want to take lead on Project A or Project B? Saying no was not part of the conversation. The structure forces agreement, but makes it feel like collaboration, and that is the trap. You are still being told what to do. It just feels nicer. Now zoom out. Ever notice how political debates usually boil down to two extreme sides? one red, one blue, one left, one right. You pick your team. You root for your side. But ask yourself, who benefits when your focus is locked on the fight? Who benefits when you are so busy defending your choice? You stop questioning whether there was a third option or a better question altogether. That is not a glitch. That is the strategy. If I can control the options, I do not need to control your decision. I just need to make sure every path leads to the outcome I want. This happens in workplaces too. You get asked to join a committee or to pick which new project to lead, but stepping back to say none of these align with your goals. That feels like rebellion. So you choose the lesser evil. You stay quiet. You stay cooperative. And it feels like professionalism. But really, it is submission dressed up as teamwork. Here is the core problem. Most of us do not ask who built the choices in front of us. We just pick the one that feels least painful. That is what pseudo-choice feeds on. Our fatigue, our need to feel in control, our hope that at least one of these options will give us peace. And so we choose. And in that moment, we reinforce the system. Because every time you pick between two bad options, you are sending a message. You are saying thank you for letting me pick. Even when you never asked for what you actually needed, it is not always malicious. Sometimes people offer limited choices because they think they are being helpful. But the effect is the same. You get boxed in, and you stop dreaming about what exists outside the frame, because your brain is too busy surviving inside it. Now here is the scary part. The more you accept false choices, the harder it becomes to recognize them. You start internalizing the system. You start saying things like, "This is just how things are. This is how life works." You convince yourself that having two options is better than none. So you settle, you compromise, you shrink, and you call it maturity. But real growth does not come from choosing between two broken things. Real power is saying neither. Real freedom is walking away from the table entirely and asking why these were the only choices you were ever given. You were not put here to decorate a cage. You were put here to question why it was built in the first place. So next time you are offered a choice, pause, zoom out, ask yourself, who benefits from me choosing either of these? What is being hidden behind the illusion of control? And what would I ask for if I believed I deserved more than what I was given? Because maybe the problem is not that your options are bad. Maybe the problem is that you stopped believing you had the right to demand better ones. Framing via contrast. You ever notice how something can look amazing right after you see something awful? That is not a coincidence. That is contrast, and it is one of the oldest psychological tricks in the book. Let me show you how it works. You walk into a clothing store. You see a jacket. Looks pretty good. You check the price. $200, way too much. You put it back. A few minutes later, you find another jacket. Similar style, but this one is $90. Suddenly, that one feels like a steal. But here is the catch. If you saw the $90 jacket first, you probably would have thought that was expensive too. The reason it feels affordable is not because it is affordable. It is because your brain just got hit with a bigger number. That $200 tag changed your internal scale. It shifted your frame. That is framing via contrast. You were not evaluating the jacket. You were reacting to what came before it. And that one tiny shift changed how you saw everything else in the store. This trick works because your brain does not evaluate things in isolation. It compares, always. That is how we make sense of value, of worth, of decisions. We are not built to know what something is. We are built to judge how it compares to something else. And that little quirk, it gets used against you every single day. In real estate, a bad-looking house is often shown before a decent one. That way, when you walk into the second place, it feels like a massive upgrade. But take that same house and show it first, and now it feels average. Nothing changed except the order. Framing is not about the thing. It is about what surrounds it. You can make almost anything look good or bad, depending on what you put next to it. And marketers know this cold. Ever wonder why you see those $5,000 luxury watches in store windows, even if nobody buys them? It is to make the $500 watch inside seem affordable. Same with restaurants that list one ridiculously overpriced bottle of wine at the top of the menu. Not because they want to sell it, but because it makes the next one down feel like a reasonable choice. It is never about selling the expensive item. It is about setting the stage. And this is not just about money. It is about people too. Imagine you meet someone who is rude, cold, dismissive. Then 5 minutes later you meet someone who is slightly more polite. They seem kind. They seem warm. But they are not. They are just nicer than the first person. That first interaction shifted your emotional baseline. Now you are grading on a curve. This happens in job interviews, dating, customer service, everywhere. People and experiences are judged not on what they are, but what they follow. You think you are being objective, but you are just reacting to the setup. And here is the really sneaky part. You can frame yourself using contrast. You show up late once, then you show up on time twice. Suddenly you are seen as improving, even if you are just doing the bare minimum. Or you underperform at work, then slightly improve, and now people see you as hardworking. Not because you are, but because the change is more noticeable than the result. We remember the shift, not the standard. That is how contrast warps reality. Politicians do it constantly. They follow up bad news with less bad news so it feels like a win. Or they lower expectations just so they can beat them. They are not solving the problem. They are reframing the lens. It is manipulation. But it works. And the most dangerous part, it feels natural. It does not feel like someone is messing with your mind. It feels like you are making a clear, rational choice, because you do not notice the frame. You just notice how things make you feel. And that is what contrast targets. Your emotional instinct, your gut response, not your logic, not your long-term awareness, just your snap decision in the moment. So what do? You slow down. You ask yourself, compared to what? When something feels like a great deal, a great opportunity, a great person, pause. Is it actually good? Or is it just better than the last thing I saw? Because that one question can snap you out of the illusion. It can stop the trick before it lands. Framing via contrast is not just a sales tactic, it is a social weapon. It is a cognitive shortcut, and once you start spotting it, you will see how often your choices were never really about the thing you picked, but about what it was standing next to. And maybe that jacket was never a bargain. Maybe it just looked like one, because someone made sure you saw the expensive one first. Repetition truthus, illusory truth effect. You hear it once and shrug. You hear it again and pause. You hear it a third time and suddenly you are thinking, maybe it is true. That is not logic. That is repetition. And your brain eats it up. This is one of the easiest ways to plant an idea inside someone's head. You do not need evidence. You do not need depth. All you need is volume and time. Say it often enough, and people start to believe it. It is called the illusory truth effect. But you probably know it better as the lie that somehow became fact, the rumor that turned into common knowledge, the myth everyone believes but nobody remembers why. Because here is how your brain works. Familiar feels true. That is it. That is the mechanism. If your brain has heard something before, it starts to process it faster. It feels smoother. It feels easier. And your brain takes that ease as a sign of truth. It is not checking the content. It is checking the feeling. If it feels familiar, it must be safe. If it is safe, it must be true. You think you are evaluating ideas. But a lot of the time, you are just reacting to rhythm, to frequency. Think about it. Advertisers do not run the same slogan 100 times because they are lazy. They do it because it works. You stop questioning it. You start reciting it. It becomes part of the mental wallpaper, even if it started as complete garbage. This is why politicians repeat the same phrases over and over. They are not just talking. They are programming. They are bypassing critical thinking by grinding down your resistance. You hear it once, you disagree. You hear it a few more times, you start to doubt yourself. Not because the argument got stronger, but because your brain got tired. Now here is where it gets disturbing. The more distracted you are, the more vulnerable you become. When your brain is multitasking or fatigued, it relies even more on familiarity. It does not have the energy to verify, so it takes shortcuts, and repetition is the shortcut that wins. This is how social media shapes belief. You scroll. You see the same idea phrased 10 different ways. 10 different posts. 10 different voices. You are not even trying to learn anything. You are just soaking it in. And before you know it, you are repeating those same ideas in your own words. You have adopted them, but you never really chose them. They just showed up enough times to feel right. Now step back and look at how dangerous that is, because repetition does not care about accuracy. It rewards confidence. It rewards volume. It rewards bold lies told often. So the loudest voice wins, not the truest one. You can flood someone with falsehoods, and over time, they will start to believe it. And not just believe it, defend it, spread it, fight for it. Because now it is part of how they see the world, part of how they explain things. It feels real, and that is enough. You want to know how entire groups of people fall for propaganda, how toxic ideologies survive across generations, how someone can deny something even when the evidence is right in front of them. Start with repetition, not reason. And it happens in personal relationships too. You are told over and over again that you are difficult, that you are selfish, that you are ungrateful. Not once, but constantly. It starts as noise. Then it becomes your inner voice. You start to believe it. You do not need proof. You just need someone to repeat it enough that it feels like truth. That is not memory. That is programming. And if you are not aware of it, you will live your entire life defending ideas that were planted in you without your consent. So how do you protect yourself? The first step is to notice the trick. If something keeps popping up in your mind, and you are not sure why, pause. Ask where it came from. Ask when you first heard it. Ask how many times you have seen it, read it, said it. Familiar does not equal true, and just because your brain has heard it before does not mean your heart needs to carry it. Because here is the other side of this. Repetition is not always a weapon. It can also be a tool. You can use it to rewrite the stories in your head. You can use it to repeat what is actually true until it feels more real than the garbage you were fed. You can remind yourself every single day that you are not too much, that you are not broken, that you are not behind, because the world will not always repeat what you need to hear. So sometimes you have to become your own echo, but whether it is used for truth or lies, repetition always works. That is the scary part, and that is the power. Pacing and leading. Ever talk to someone and feel like they just get you? Like they are speaking your thoughts out loud, finishing your sentences, reading your mood without even trying. It feels warm, comfortable, familiar. That is not just empathy. That is a tactic, and if you are not careful, it can be used to steer you into choices you would never make on your own. This trick is called pacing and leading. It starts with alignment. That is the pacing part. Someone reflects your reality back to you. Your mood, your beliefs, even your body language. You feel heard, understood, seen. They describe what you are already experiencing, and because they are not challenging you or correcting you, your guard drops. You lean in. You start to trust them. They are saying what you are thinking, so it must be safe. Then comes the lead. Once you are comfortable, once you have nodded a few times, once they have earned that unspoken yes in your head, they start to shift. Just a little. A nudge, a suggestion, a change in direction. And because you already agreed with everything up to this point, your brain assumes this next part is also trustworthy, even if it is something you would normally question. Now it slips past your filters. You are not being persuaded. You are being guided. But it does not feel like manipulation. It feels like your idea. This is why expert salespeople are so good. They do not push. They mirror. They pace you emotionally and mentally, using your language and energy until you relax. Then they lead. They introduce the offer, the change, the solution, and because you feel seen, you do not feel sold to. You feel like this decision came from you. This happens in therapy, in negotiation, in politics, and yes, in personal relationships too. Someone agrees with your frustration, joins you in your emotion, walks with you in your story. Then they steer the story. You are upset, and they match your energy. You are doubtful, and they match your skepticism. Now you are connected. Then they suggest something, a new perspective, a different conclusion. And you go with it, not because they made a strong case, but because they made you feel safe enough to follow. And this is not just about words. People pace with their body, their tone, their rhythm. Ever notice how someone starts talking slower when you are upset, or mirrors your posture when you are nervous? That is not random. That is pacing. Humans naturally feel more comfortable around others who reflect them. That is how we build trust. The problem is, this trust can be faked. And once it is there, leading becomes incredibly easy. This is how toxic people gain influence. They do not barge in with pressure. They blend in with understanding. They present themselves as allies, mirrors, soulmates. They nod when you rant. They validate your wounds. They feed your doubts. Then they slowly introduce their own beliefs, their own vision, their own version of the truth. And by the time you realize it does not feel quite right, it already feels like part of you. Because here is the dark part. Your brain does not always separate agreement from alignment. Once someone matches your emotional world, your brain assumes they must be right, even if what they are leading you toward is manipulative or harmful. Your natural instinct is to follow the path of least resistance, and when someone has paced you correctly, resistance disappears. This is how entire belief systems are absorbed without question. This is how people fall into cults, conspiracy groups, or toxic relationships that they later look back on and think, how did I ever believe that? It never felt like a leap. It felt like a conversation. But every step was designed to lead you somewhere. So how do you defend yourself? You start by asking questions when things feel a little too cinced up, when someone always seems to agree, when their vibe matches yours too perfectly, when they say exactly what you needed to hear. That is not always a red flag, but it is worth noticing. Ask yourself if they are meeting you where you are or slowly pulling you toward where they want you to go. Because sometimes what feels like a deep connection is actually a carefully disguised leash. Pacing and leading is not inherently evil. It can be used for support, for therapy, for communication. But when used strategically without your awareness, it stops being connection and starts being control. And if someone can guide you without ever showing their hand, you have to wonder how many of your choices were really your own. Symbolic hijacking. You are not just buying a logo. You are buying what it means to you. And that meaning, that feeling you get when you see it, it might not even be yours. Because in psychology, there is a tactic called symbolic hijacking. It is when someone takes a symbol that already holds emotional weight and attaches their own agenda to it. They do not create the emotion. They borrow it. They steal it. They wrap themselves in it so that you trust them faster, so that you care more, so that you believe without realizing you were ever persuaded. This is everywhere, and it works because symbols bypass logic. They hit you right in the gut, right in the identity. A flag, a fist, a color, a gesture, a cross, a jersey, a ribbon, a slogan. You see it, and your body already knows how to feel. It stands for something. It means something. And that is where the trap begins. Because if someone can hijack that meaning, they can hijack you. Think about how companies do this. They slap a pride flag on their product, and suddenly they are inclusive. They sponsor one environmental campaign, and now they are green. They post one statement of solidarity, and now they are an ally. But when you look closer, their actions do not line up. They are not fighting for the values they are displaying. They are just wearing the symbol like a costume. Not because they believe in it, but because you do. That is symbolic hijacking. It is not just branding. It is manipulation, and it is not just corporations. Movements do it too. Politicians do it. Influencers do it. They take symbols that are sacred, painful, patriotic, spiritual, historical, and they wrap themselves in them to make you feel something, even if they stand for the exact opposite underneath. They take your trust in the symbol and redirect it toward them, and once they have that emotional link, you stop questioning. That is what makes this so powerful. You stop looking at actions. You start judging by association. If they carry the same symbol, they must be one of us. If they say the right words, wear the right colors, show the right signs, they must be safe. So you give them your time, your attention, your money, your loyalty. But what you are really giving them is your emotional shortcut. You are trusting the symbol more than the person using it. Now imagine how dangerous that is in politics. When a leader uses a national flag, a religious phrase, or an old cultural icon, not to honor it but to gain power through it, you feel pride when you see the flag. You feel connection when you hear that phrase. So when they use it, you project all of that emotion onto them. Even if they are corrupt, even if they are dangerous, they know the symbol will speak louder than the truth. And this trick works even if you are skeptical, because symbolism is not rational, it is emotional. It lives in the part of your brain that acts before you think, and once that part of you lights up, your guard goes down. It feels like identity. It feels like tradition. It feels like purpose. But what it is a hijacking of something that used to be pure. You ever see a hateful group wave a flag that used to mean unity? Or someone wear a religious symbol while preaching division? That is not an accident. That is a strategy. They are using the emotional weight of the symbol to carry ideas that would never stand on their own. They are not building trust. They are stealing it. Even in everyday life, this happens more than you notice. Someone flashes a certain hand sign, uses certain coded language, name drops a belief system. You feel connected. You think maybe they are one of us. But symbols can be learned. Anyone can copy the look without living the value. That is the core danger. You start to follow the symbol instead of the truth. So how do you protect yourself? You slow down. You look past the surface. You ask, are their actions aligned with what this symbol really means? Are they using it to elevate the message? Or to shield themselves from criticism? Are they actually committed to the values this stands for? Or are they just wearing it because they know you are? Because here is the truth no one wants to hear. Not everyone who waves your flag is on your side. Not everyone who wears your symbol is part of your cause. And not everyone who says the right words believes a single one of them. Some people just know what pulls your heartstrings. And they will hijack those strings to control where you go. Because justification, ever been in a situation where someone asked you for something, gave you a quick reason, and you just said yes? No debate, no hesitation. You just went along with it, not because it made sense, but because it sounded like it did. That is the power of the word because it is one of the simplest manipulation tools out there, and you are being hit with it way more than you realize. See, the human brain craves reasons. We are wired to look for cause and effect. If someone gives us a reason for something, even if it is weak, even if it is irrelevant, we are much more likely to go along with it. Not because the reason is strong, but because it exists at all. The moment you hear the word because, your brain stops resisting. It assumes what comes next will justify the request. And most of the time, it does not even check. It just fills in the logic automatically. There is a famous study where people stood in line to use a copier. One group asked if they could cut in line. The success rate was decent. But when they added the word because and gave a reason, even something as useless as because I need to make copies, the success rate shot up. Just adding a reason, any reason, made people complain more. That is not rational. That is automatic, and it is not just about printers. It is about persuasion in every form. Marketers do it. Leaders do it. People you date do it. They ask for your time, your energy, your money, your trust, and all they need is that one magic word to grace the wheels. Because it is urgent, because it is trending, because everyone else is doing it, because it will be worth it, because you are smart, because you deserve it, because you care, because you always help, and you start to believe it, not because it is true, but because your brain wants the logic to be there, even if it is made of air. That is the trap. We do not question the logic. We just look for the structure. The word because feels like an explanation, so we stop asking questions. And if someone sounds confident enough, we do not even notice that what they are saying makes no real sense at all. This is how people get talked into shady contracts, manipulative relationships, political extremes, fake investments. Someone says it with a smile, says it with certainty, tags on a weak reason, and that is all it takes. Because your brain hates ambiguity. It wants closure. It wants to say, oh, okay, that makes sense, even if it really doesn't. And the more emotionally charged the situation is, the more likely you are to fall for it. When you are stressed, when you are rushed, when you are afraid to seem rude, when you want to be helpful or liked, your defenses drop even lower. You just want a reason to justify going along with it. And because gives you that out, it gives you permission to say yes, even when you should not, even when every part of you feels unsure. That is what makes this trick so powerful. It does not feel like manipulation. It feels like a regular human interaction. Someone made a request. They explained it. You agreed. But the whole thing may have been scripted to trigger a reflex in your brain, not a decision. This gets weaponized in debates too. Someone makes a claim, and the moment they use the word because your brain leans in, even if what follows is complete nonsense. It still feels more true. It feels more justified. And if they say it with the right tone, most people will not notice the logic gap. Even children figure this out early. Watch a kid try to negotiate bedtime. They will say, I need to stay up because I am not tired, or I need a snack because I did not eat enough dinner. The reasons might be weak, but the structure works. It sounds convincing, and a tired parent might say, fine, just go. Because works because we want it to work. We want the world to make sense. We want decisions to have reasons. And when someone hands us a ready-made justification, we grab it. Because it feels easier than thinking deeper. It feels more polite than pushing back. It feels safer than sitting with uncertainty. But here is where you take your power back. Next time someone gives you a reason, pause. Do not just listen for the because. Listen to what actually follows it. Does it make sense? Is it relevant? Or is it just a filler to get you to say yes? Not every request deserves your agreement. Not every explanation deserves your trust. And just because someone uses the word because does not mean their reason is real. Mere exposure effect. You ever start liking a song you hated at first? Like the first time you heard it, it was annoying, cringy. You thought there is no way I am listening to this again, but then it just kept showing up, in the background, in a store, on a reel, playing from someone else's phone, and next thing you know, you are humming it. Then tapping your foot, then it is on your playlist. That is not just taste changing. That is your brain adapting to repetition, and there is a name for it. The mere exposure effect. The more you are exposed to something, anything, the more likely you are to start liking it, even if you were neutral or even negative at the beginning. Familiarity breeds comfort, and comfort breeds trust. That is how this trick works, and it is used against you constantly. Brands know this. Politicians know this. Social media platforms are built around it. They do not need to convince you with logic. They just need to put the same thing in front of your face enough times that it starts to feel familiar, because the brain takes that feeling of familiarity and twists it into a shortcut. This feels familiar. Therefore, it must be safe. It must be true. It must be good. So the message does not even have to be convincing. It just has to be repeated, over and over, subtly, casually, in the background, until it feels like part of your environment. And by the time your guard is down, it is not just noise anymore. It is preference. It is identity. Think about logos. You do not need to love a brand to feel connected to it. You just need to see it everywhere. In ads, on shirts, in movies, on your friends, on influencers. The logo becomes a symbol you trust, not because it earned it, but because you have seen it so much that your brain says, hey, I know this. And that tiny emotional shift is all it takes to start creating loyalty. Even faces. People are rated as more attractive just by being seen more often. Not because their features changed. Not because they did anything special. Just because your brain starts to prefer the familiar, and suddenly, average turns into beautiful. Just like that. And here is where it gets dark. This is how lies become beliefs. How opinions become facts. How dangerous people become mainstream. They do not need to shout. They just need to show up. Repeatedly. On your feed. In headlines. On shirts. In memes. They become part of the background noise. And once they are in the background, they stop feeling like a threat. They start feeling normal. And that is the danger. Because the mere exposure effect does not care about truth. It does not care about morality. It only cares about repetition. That is the trigger. Not logic. Not evidence. Just exposure. So the more you hear something, the more real it starts to feel. Even if it is a total lie. Even if you know it is wrong, the repetition can still wear you down. You start to say, well, maybe there is a little truth to it. Or, I mean, it is probably exaggerated, but still. Or my favorite, I do not agree with it, but I get why some people do. That is the moment it gets in. Not because you believe it, but because you stopped rejecting it. And sometimes, that is all it takes. This is also why people stay in toxic relationships. Not because the relationship is good, but because it is familiar. You can hate something and still prefer it over the unknown. Your brain equates repeated exposure with safety. It is twisted, but it is real. And it is why rebranding can be so risky. Because people do not like new. They like familiar. They like what they have seen before. That is why companies do not always change the product. They just change how often you see it. New version, same formula. Different packaging, same flavor. They are not selling you something better. They are selling you something you have seen enough to feel comfortable with. So how do you fight it? You start by noticing what you are being exposed to the most. What keeps showing up in your feed, in your music, in your conversations, in your background. Ask yourself, do I actually like this? Or is this just the thing I have seen the most? Ask yourself, do I trust this message, or am I just used to it? Because if you are not choosing what you are exposed to, someone else is, and they are counting on the fact that your brain will get tired of resisting. Because once it feels familiar, it starts to feel true. And once it feels true, it starts to feel right. And that is when it stops feeling like persuasion and starts feeling like your own belief. Priming. You ever walk into a room, smell something sweet, and suddenly feel more relaxed? Or hear a song from your childhood and your whole mood shifts? You think that is just nostalgia or coincidence. But what if I told you something way deeper is happening every single day, and you are not even aware of it? That is what priming does. Priming is psychological sleight of hand. Tiny details, totally invisible to you, that shape what you think, how you feel, and what you do next. Not in a big dramatic way, not in a way you can spot, but in a quiet, invisible whisper that steers your behavior just enough to make a difference. And here is the messed up part. You will never notice it. Not while it is happening. Not even after. It could be a color, a word, an image, a sound, a temperature, the background music in a store, the lighting in a hallway, a single sentence on a billboard. These things seem meaningless, but they activate certain associations in your brain, and those associations pull you subtly towards certain decisions. You think you are choosing freely, but you are already nudged before the choice even appears. There was a study where people were asked to unscramble words before walking down a hallway. One group got words related to rudeness. Another got words related to patience. Afterward, they were told to wait for someone to finish a conversation. The group primed with rudeness interrupted faster. The others waited longer. Same hallway, same situation. The only difference was the words they saw minutes earlier. That is priming. And it does not stop at words. Colors prime you too. Red can trigger alertness or aggression. Blue creates calm. Yellow can make people feel more energized. These are not just feelings. They guide behavior. A red button makes you act faster. A blue screen keeps you scrolling longer. You think it is aesthetic, but it is strategy. Even the way something smells can prime you. Ever noticed how real estate agents bake cookies during open houses? That scent primes you to feel at home. That is not an accident. That is neuroscience being weaponized. Images work the same way. If you see a photo of money right before making a decision, your brain unconsciously shifts toward self-interest. You are more likely to act competitively. But show a picture of a baby. You become more generous, more protective. You did not think about it, but your brain did, and it rerouted your instincts before you ever knew. This is what advertisers are doing all day long. They are not just selling a product, they are planting cues, priming you with emotions, values, cravings. A happy family eating chips. A beautiful sunset behind a pickup truck. A celebrity using a face cream. You are not buying the product. You are buying the state of mind they just primed you into. And you know what makes this even scarier. Priming works even when you are told it is happening. Even if you know the setup. Even if you are aware of the influence. It still works, because it bypasses your conscious thinking. It hits the part of your brain that reacts, not reflects. You cannot logic your way out of it once it is in motion. The best you can do is learn to notice the signs and pause long enough to make a real choice. This is used in politics too. The background music at a rally, the props, the lighting, the color of the tie, the framing of words like freedom or threat or protect. You think you are listening to a policy, but you are being emotionally steered before the speech even starts. And social media, that is a priming playground. Scroll through enough angry posts and your mood changes. Not because you believe any of it, but because you have been emotionally set up. Your responses become sharper. Your patience drops. Your assumptions harden. You have been primed, not persuaded. Now here is the truth that hurts a little. You cannot shut this off. Your brain is wired to be influenced by its environment. That is not weakness. That is survival. Your mind is constantly scanning for context clues to figure out what is safe, what is valuable, what to expect next. Priming hacks into that survival system. It uses your own instincts to steer you. So no, you will not catch it every time, but you can get better at asking the right question. What just happened that made me feel this way? Was it the lighting, the tone, the word choice? Am I reacting to this moment, or to something my brain was already queued up for? Because if you never ask, someone else will keep answering for you. And the scariest kind of manipulation is the kind that feels like your own thought. Salience Trick. You ever wonder why some things just grab your attention instantly, and others fade into the background, even if they are way more important? That is not random. That is the Salience Trick. The human brain does not pay attention to what matters most. It pays attention to what stands out. What is loud? What is bright? What is different? What breaks the pattern? That is what salience means. It is the quality of something that makes it pop in your perception, not because it is important, but because it is noticeable. And here is the trick. If someone can control what stands out, they control what you focus on, even if it means distracting you from the truth. You see it everywhere. The bright red sale sign in a store makes you think you are getting a deal, even if the price is barely different from yesterday. The breaking news banner flashes across your screen, making something feel urgent, even if it is not. A single dramatic story grabs your attention and makes you forget the boring but far bigger problem happening quietly in the background. Salience hijacks your attention, and attention is the gateway to belief. Whatever you focus on becomes what you care about, and whatever you care about starts to shape how you think, how you judge, and what you decide. So if someone can shift your focus, they can shift your reality. And here is the scary part. You will not notice it happening because it feels natural. Your brain is wired for it. You evolved to survive by noticing what is new, what is loud, what is different. That used to help us avoid danger. Now it just makes us easy to distract. Politicians do this constantly. When they are in trouble, they do not need to fix the issue. They just need to give you something more salient to look at. A new outrage, a new headline, a new enemy. Your attention shifts. Your emotions follow. And suddenly, you forget what you were mad about 10 minutes ago. And the media. They do not always tell you what to think. But they absolutely tell you what to think about. They flood you with what is most visually shocking, most emotionally triggering, most clickable. Because salience drives traffic, and traffic means money. Meanwhile, the things that actually matter, the slow, complex, long-term issues, get buried. Because they are not flashy. They are not fun. They are not new. They do not stand out. So they get ignored. Even in arguments or debates, this trick is everywhere. If someone wants to win a point, they do not need to be right. They just need to say something that draws attention. Something inflammatory. Something absurd. They are not trying to make a good argument. They are trying to become the center of attention. Because once they control the spotlight, they shape the narrative. It happens in marketing too. You think you are comparing two products, but really, your eyes are drawn to the one with bolder colors, larger text, a more dramatic claim. Not because it is better, just because it pops more. That is the salience trick. It does not need to be true. It just needs to stand out, and it is being used against you every single day. You get 10 things thrown at you in a feed. One of them is worded to make you angry, or scared, or curious. Your brain locks onto that one. Everything else fades. You end up reacting to what was designed to provoke you, and the rest, the stuff that actually matters, slips by unnoticed. Now here is the trap inside the trap. Once something grabs your attention, your brain tells you it must be important, not because you thought it through, just because you noticed it. And that false sense of importance creates emotional momentum. You start defending it, sharing it, arguing about it, even if, deep down, it does not deserve that level of focus. That is how people get manipulated without realizing it. That is how you end up caring deeply about the wrong thing. That is how the salience trick wins. So what do? You start by noticing what is trying to hijack your attention. Ask yourself, is this actually important, or is it just loud? Is it meaningful, or just flashy? Am I focusing on this because I care, or because it was designed to be impossible to ignore? Because once you can separate what stands out from what truly matters, you stop reacting to noise. and start responding with clarity. Scarcity framing's artificial scarcity. You are scrolling through a site and see it. Only 3 left. Or limited time offer. Or this deal expires in 20 minutes. And suddenly your heart beats a little faster. Your hand hesitates over the button. You were not even sure you wanted it 5 seconds ago. But now it feels urgent. Like if you do not act, you will lose something. That is not just urgency. That is engineered scarcity, and it is one of the most powerful psychological tricks used against you every single day. Scarcity framing works by making something feel rare, exclusive, or about to disappear, even if it is not. And when your brain senses something is scarce, it assigns it more value, not because of the actual product, but because of the fear of missing out. It flips a switch inside you. You stop thinking clearly. You stop weighing pros and cons. Instead of asking, do I really need this, you start asking, what if I miss it? What if I regret not grabbing it while I had the chance? That fear overrides your logic. That fear makes you say yes when you would have said no 5 minutes ago. And here is the worst part. In most cases, the scarcity is fake. It is manufactured. Artificial. That countdown timer, it resets the moment you reload the page. That low stock warning, completely made up. That limited edition tag, there are warehouses full of it. But it does not matter, because the moment your brain believes it might vanish, it becomes instantly more desirable. You are not chasing the item. You are chasing the chance not to lose it. There is a study where people were asked to rate the quality of identical cookies. One jar was full. The other had only 2 cookies left. Same cookie. Same ingredients. But people rated the nearly empty jar as higher quality. Why? Because it looked like it was running out. Scarcity triggered a value spike, even when nothing changed. And companies know this. Oh, they know. It is why fashion brands limit releases. Not because they cannot make more, but because it keeps demand inflated. It is why ticket sites show those flashing alerts telling you 3 people are looking at this exact seat. They want you to feel like, if you do not buy right now, it will be gone forever. It happens in dating apps too. Limited matches per day. Messages that expire. Super likes. Not because it makes the experience better, but because it makes it feel scarce, time sensitive, exclusive, and that gets your attention. That gets your engagement. That gets you addicted. And here is where it gets dark. Scarcity framing is not just about products. It is used to shape how you think, what you believe, what you fear. Ever been told that a certain group is taking your jobs, or your opportunities, or your country? That is scarcity framing on a societal level. It makes you feel like there is not enough to go around. So you better pick a side. You better act now, before something is taken from you. It turns politics into panic. It turns news into fear. It turns people into threats. All because someone framed the issue as scarce. And you might think, yeah, but I would know if I was being manipulated like that. No, you would not, because this tactic does not try to change your mind. It grabs your instincts. It pulls on your survival brain, your most ancient programming, the part of you that evolved to fight for the last piece of meat, the last cave, the last resource. You feel it before you think it. So how do you fight back? You start by asking, is this actually limited? Is this really rare? Or is someone just trying to make it feel that way so I move faster? So I stop thinking. So I react instead of reflect, because real value does not need panic. Real opportunity does not need pressure. And if someone is rushing you, it is probably not because the thing is special. It is because they are afraid you might take a second to realize it is not. Default bias. You probably think most of your decisions are made on purpose. That you weigh your options, compare the pros and cons, and choose what makes the most sense. But there is a silent trap underneath all of it. A tiny detail that influences more choices than you would ever believe. It is the default, and it is one of the most invisible forms of manipulation you deal with every day. See, humans have a strange tendency. When we are unsure or overwhelmed, we do not choose what is best. We choose what is already chosen for us. Whatever is already selected, already checked, already set. That default setting becomes the decision, and you do not even realize it is happening. You sign up for something, and there is a box already checked that says, "Yes, send me marketing emails." You do not uncheck it, not because you want the emails, but because it is easier to leave it the way it is. That is default bias. You install a new app, and the settings are pre-loaded. You do not dig through them. You just go with what is there, not because you like those settings, but because they were already picked. That is default bias. It is not just laziness. It is wiring. Your brain wants to conserve energy, and every decision you make burns a little bit of it. So when you see a default, even a small one, your brain takes the shortcut. It tells you that someone smarter must have chosen that for a reason. It must be standard. It must be safe. But here is what they do not tell you. Those defaults are not neutral. They are designed, chosen, strategically placed to guide your behavior in a specific direction. And most of the time, the person who picked them is not trying to help you. They are trying to help themselves. Take organ donation rates across countries. In some countries, nearly everyone donates. In others, almost no one does. The difference. In high donation countries, people are automatically opted in. You have to uncheck the box to say no. In low donation countries, you have to check the box to say yes. That tiny change, one single box, shifts national behavior, not because people suddenly care more, but because most people do not change the default. And that same tactic is used everywhere. In finance, default retirement plans lead people to save more money, but only if they are auto-enrolled. In online shopping, the default shipping option affects how fast people buy. In tech, your privacy settings are set a certain way, and odds are you never touch them, because once it is default, it feels normal. And once something feels normal, it becomes invisible. That is where the danger really lies. You stop asking why it is set up that way. You stop wondering if it serves you or them. You just go along with it. Because resisting takes effort, and effort feels like risk. Even on a deeper level, your beliefs, your routines, your habits, they all have defaults. Maybe it is the way you respond to stress. Maybe it is the kind of person you always date. Maybe it is the voice in your head that tells you what is possible for someone like you. Those defaults did not fall from the sky. They were shaped by experience, by environment, by repetition, and at some point you stopped questioning them. You just accepted them as the way things are. But here is the wake-up call. Just because something is default does not mean it is right or helpful or true. It just means no one changed it. And that is where the real power comes in, not in fighting every system or resisting every choice, but in slowing down just long enough to ask one simple question: who benefits from this default? Because if the answer is not you, maybe it is time to uncheck the box. And maybe it is time to set your own. Authority costume effect. You are walking through a parking lot. A man in a clean uniform with a clipboard tells you to move your car. You do it. You never question who he is. You never ask for ID. Why? Because of the uniform, the clipboard, the voice that sounds sure of itself. That is all it takes. One costume, and suddenly you feel like this person has authority. That is the authority costume effect. And it plays you harder than you realize. Your brain has been trained since childhood to respond to symbols. You do not just listen to authority. You respond to what looks like authority, and that is not the same thing. It is not about truth. It is not about qualifications. It is about surface level signals, uniforms, lab coats, expensive suits, the right tone of voice, the right kind of body language. The illusion of control is enough to hijack your decision-making. That is what makes this trick so powerful. It works on almost everyone. Even when you know about it, there is a reason the most dangerous con artists in history did not hide. They dressed the part. Fake generals. Fake executives. They all understood something most people never think about. If you walk like you are in charge, talk like you are in charge, and wear the symbols of authority, most people will not push back. They will not look deeper, because the brain hates uncertainty, and the costume tells it, this person is safe to follow. It has nothing to do with evidence. It has nothing to do with logic. It is a gut-level shortcut. The brain sees the lab coat, and it hears credibility. It sees the suit, and it smells power. It sees the badge, and it assumes control. You are wired to surrender to these signals. Think about this. There was a study where people followed instructions to give what they thought were dangerous electric shocks to someone else. The person getting shocked was acting, of course, but the people delivering the shocks did not know that. They just kept pressing the button. Why? Because the person telling them to do it wore a white coat and looked like a scientist. That was enough. The costume triggered compliance, even when their gut told them it was wrong. That is how far this can go. And it happens every single day in more subtle ways. A guy on YouTube wears a fitted blazer, stands in front of bookshelves, and talks about financial freedom. You assume he knows what he is talking about. A woman with a stethoscope around her neck starts giving you health tips on social media. You assume she is a doctor. A dude flexes his wristwatch and rides in a rented sports car while selling you an online course. And you think, maybe he has figured something out that I have not. The visual signals override the critical thinking, and the people who use this trick count on that. They want you to trust the packaging, not the substance, not the proof. Just the look, because the look is faster, easier, more powerful. It taps into something emotional, and when your emotions are activated, your logic slows down. You do not have to be dumb to fall for this. You just have to be human. Even smart people follow the costume. Even educated people fall for the suit, the tone, the setup. It is automatic. It is primal. We all do it sometimes, especially when we are in unfamiliar territory or feeling insecure. So here is where it gets dangerous. When someone puts on the costume of authority, they can control not just your choices, but your beliefs. You start deferring to them, agreeing with them, repeating them, and if you do it often enough, their ideas start to feel like your own, even if they are wrong, even if they are harmful, even if they are manipulating you. You see it in marketing, in politics, in business, in relationships. You see it when people talk louder to sound more confident. You see it when someone dresses better than everyone in the room, and suddenly people treat them like the expert. You see it when someone never explains their logic, but they speak with so much certainty that everyone else stays silent. Costume, confidence, control. That is the chain. So what do you do with that? How do you fight back? You start by asking better questions. Not just does this person sound sure of themselves, but do they actually make sense? Not just do they look like they know what they are doing, but are they showing their reasoning? Are they sharing facts or just speaking with authority? And here is the biggest one. Ask yourself why you are so willing to trust them. Is it their message, or is it their presentation? Because when you know this trick is being used on you, you start to take your power back. You slow down. You look past the costume. You stop letting people rent space in your mind just because they know how to dress the part. Because real authority is not about how someone looks. It is about how well they think, how clearly they speak, how honestly they lead. The real ones are not afraid to be questioned. The real ones do not hide behind the suit or the clipboard or the white coat. They do not need the costume, because they earned the role. And when you can see the difference, you stop being the audience and start being the one who decides who deserves your trust. False urgency. You ever get that feeling where you see something online and your chest tightens just a little bit? That little jolt in your gut telling you to move fast. Only 5 left in stock. Offer ends in 10 minutes. Flash sale today only. Hurry or you miss out forever. That feeling right there. That is not instinct. That is not urgency. That is manufactured pressure. That is what false urgency feels like. And it works almost every time, because your brain hates the idea of missing something, especially when it thinks everyone else is getting it. So when a countdown timer pops up, or you hear words like now, instantly, only available today, your survival instincts light up. Even if the thing you are rushing to get is not even that important, the fear of missing out hijacks your logic. This trick is one of the most common, most effective forms of psychological manipulation used against you daily. It is so baked into modern life that you do not even see it anymore. But once you do, it is everywhere. Here is how it works. False urgency is when someone creates a fake time limit or a fake scarcity to force you into making a fast decision. They do not want you to think. They want you to react. They want you to move so quickly that your brain does not get a chance to ask the most important question. Do I even want this? And here is where it gets twisted. It does not matter if the deadline is fake. It does not matter if the product is still available tomorrow. The second your brain registers that there is a clock ticking, your risk center activates. You start imagining regret. You start thinking, what if I wait and miss it? What if this really is the last chance? And now, instead of weighing pros and cons, you are chasing a disappearing prize that might not even be real. It is not your fault. This pressure tactic is designed to override your decision-making system. You are biologically wired to pay attention to threats. And artificial urgency mimics the feeling of danger. Not physical danger, but psychological risk. The idea that if you do not act now, you will lose something. An opportunity, a deal, a benefit. Retailers know this. Marketers know this. Tech companies abuse this constantly. They install countdowns on checkout pages. They send you last chance emails 5 times a week. They create fake low inventory messages. And every time you see them, your brain starts moving faster than it should. You click buy without reading the return policy. You book a trip you were not ready to pay for. You sign up for a webinar you do not even remember needing. And after you do, a weird calm washes over you. because the anxiety is gone. You did what the pressure told you to do, and your brain gets a short dopamine hit. That is the part no one talks about. False urgency does not just scare you into acting. It also rewards you for complying. That little rush you feel when you lock something in before the timer hits 0. That is not satisfaction. That is relief. Temporary relief from an anxiety someone else created on purpose, and they will do it again. Because it worked. And it is not just online. You see this in job offers. You see it in dating. You see it in political messaging. You see it in cults. Join now or miss your shot. Decide today. Time is running out. This chance will not come again. And once your brain feels that pressure, your sense of time collapses. You cannot tell if something is actually urgent or just feels that way because of how it was framed. Think about that. You are out here making real-life decisions, sometimes expensive ones, sometimes life-altering ones, based on timelines that were never real. And the worst part is, once you make the decision, you carry the consequences. But the person who rushed you, they disappear. They already got what they wanted from you. Your attention, your money, your agreement. So how do you fight back? You start with one simple rule. Never trust a clock that was not set by you. If someone tells you to act fast, pause. Ask yourself, what happens if I wait? What happens if I walk away? Is the urgency based on real-world scarcity, or is it manufactured just to control me? If the timer is fake, the pressure is fake. And if the pressure is fake, the choice you are about to make is probably not one you would have made on your own. This one shift in thinking can protect you from bad purchases, bad relationships, bad deals. Because real opportunities are not afraid of your patience. Real chances do not need to threaten you into moving, and people with good intentions will not rush your mind to shut down your doubts. So next time you feel that rising pressure in your chest, that tightening that says hurry up before it is too late, stop, breathe, look at the clock, and then ask the question they hope you never ask. What if I say no? What if I wait? What if the urgency was never real to begin with? Vividness Trick. You are walking through a store when you see two product signs. One says this food kills 4,000 people per year. The other says this food can rot your organs from the inside out, starting with your liver, then your gut, then your brain. Which one hits harder? You already know. The second one. Why? Because your brain is not moved by statistics. It is moved by pictures. That is the Vividness Trick, and it shapes more of your thinking than you want to admit. Here is how it works. The more detailed, sensory, emotional, or concrete something sounds, the more believable it becomes, even if it is not true, even if the numbers say otherwise, because your brain does not judge facts based on math. It judges based on how deeply it can imagine something. That is the trap. Someone tells you air travel is safer than driving. Cool, logical, sounds fine. But then they tell you about a plane that went down, and the way it caught fire midair, and the families crying at the gate. Suddenly you are gripping your seatbelt tighter on your next flight. You know what the stats say. You just cannot feel them. That is the core of the Vividness Trick. Feelings override facts. Visuals override logic. If something can be pictured easily, your brain treats it as more important, even if it is rare, even if it is wildly unlikely, and you do not even know it is happening. This is why the news is filled with worst-case scenarios. Not averages, not probabilities, but the most shocking, the most horrifying, the most vivid outcomes possible. Because if it bleeds, it leads. Not because that is what happens to most people, but because that is what sticks in your mind. That is what spreads. That is what makes you watch again. It gets even worse with storytelling. One emotional story about a sick child will raise more donations than 10 pages of data about a global health crisis. One video of a house burning down will drive more safety regulations than a 5-year report on fire hazards. Why? Because you can see it. You can hear it. You can imagine it happening to you, and that imagination creates urgency. It feels personal, and that feeling, not the logic, is what drives your behavior. Marketers know this. Politicians abuse it. Fear campaigns are built on it. It is why some people are terrified of shark attacks, even though falling out of bed kills more people every year. It is why parents panic over rare kidnappings, but ignore the everyday risks sitting in their own pantry. Vividness creates fear, and fear sticks. Here is where it gets dangerous, because the vividness trick does not just amplify fear. It amplifies trust too. If someone can describe a future in vivid detail, how great you will feel, how your body will change, how your life will finally look, your brain starts believing in the fantasy. Even if it has no evidence to back it up, you buy the program, you take the pills, you invest in the scheme because the dream felt real, not because it was proven, not because it was logical, but because it was vivid. You could taste it. You could see yourself there. This is the same trick used in manipulation. Cult leaders, scam artists, even toxic partners. They paint pictures. They do not ask you to think. They ask you to feel. They overload your brain with emotionally rich details. And once you start feeling more than thinking, your resistance drops. Because vividness bypasses analysis. It hijacks your imagination. And once your imagination is hooked, it does not matter what the numbers say. You will defend the lie. You will invest in the illusion. You will act as if the emotional story you were fed is now your truth. So how do you fight back? First, you learn to pause when something feels too intense too fast. Whether it is fear or excitement or urgency or guilt, that emotional spike is a signal. Someone might be pulling your mental strings. Second, ask yourself, is this idea supported by data or just a strong image? Is this decision coming from thought or just from the feeling that was planted in me? Because your brain wants to latch onto things it can picture. That is not weakness. That is wiring. But you can still slow the process down. You can recognize the trick. If something makes you scared, ask for the probability. If something makes you excited, ask for the proof. If someone is describing a crisis, ask for the scope. If someone is promising success, ask for the plan. Because vivid words can stir your emotions, but they cannot guarantee truth. And when you understand how much of your mental world is shaped by what you can picture, and how easily others can influence those pictures, you stop being a passive receiver. You start filtering. You start checking. You start choosing what to believe not based on how vivid it sounds, but on whether it holds up when you strip away the drama. That is how you escape the vividness trap, not by ignoring emotion, but by refusing to let it decide for you. Name letter effect. You probably think you make decisions based on logic, on goals, on reasons you can explain, but your brain is not that honest. In fact, sometimes it makes choices for the dumbest, most invisible reasons. One of the weirdest ones. The name letter effect. You are more likely to choose something just because it starts with the same letter as your name. That sounds harmless, even funny, until you realize how deep it runs. People named David are statistically more likely to become dentists. People named Laura are more likely to marry someone named Luke than someone named Tom. Even when choosing places to live, people unconsciously lean toward cities and states that start with the same letter as their first name. Carl likes California. Peter likes Portland. It feels random, but it is not. This is your brain playing favorites with itself. You spend your whole life hearing, writing, and seeing your own name. It becomes emotionally charged, familiar, safe. You associate those letters with identity, comfort, and pride. And without even knowing it, that familiarity spills into everything else. Your brain starts liking anything that reminds it of you, even if the connection is absurd. This is not preference. It is bias, a deep subconscious pull toward what feels like you, even when it should not matter. And advertisers love it. You know those companies that personalize your shopping experience, the ones that send you emails with your name in the subject line. It is not just to get your attention. It is to trigger your ego, to activate that little rush of recognition that makes you feel seen. Your guard drops. Your brain thinks this message must be meant for you, because it sounds like you. But here is the creepy part. That same principle gets used in persuasion, in dating, in politics, even in manipulation. Let's say a guy named Brian meets someone named Brittany. They both feel an instant connection. The chemistry seems real. But behind the scenes, part of that connection may just be shared letters. The name-letter effect creates an illusion of similarity, of shared energy, of fate. And if no one questions it, that feeling becomes real, even if it was just triggered by something as meaningless as a letter. Now stretch that out over a lifetime. How many jobs were picked because the title just sounded right? How many friendships were formed faster because the names rolled off the tongue together? How many small decisions stacked up, one after another, based on nothing more than a flicker of recognition? And you never knew, because it feels natural. It feels intuitive. You like what you like, right? Except a lot of what you like was installed before you even knew how to spell your own name. This is not about control. This is about comfort. Your brain craves patterns. It craves emotional safety, and your name is the ultimate symbol of that. So when it sees a piece of you out in the world, even just one letter, it leans toward it like gravity. That is the scary part, because it means some of your decisions are not coming from values or strategy or logic. They are coming from exposure, from repetition, from emotional bias wrapped in self-flattery. And the more you think you are immune to it, the more it affects you. This is why con artists sometimes mirror your name. Why marketers run A/B tests with names that resemble target demographics. Why political campaigns adjust language based on name familiarity in different regions. They are not always trying to convince your mind. They are trying to seduce your ego. And your ego loves hearing its name. So what do you do with this? First, you learn to catch it. You train yourself to notice when something feels good for no good reason. You pause when your gut says yes just because it sounds familiar. You ask yourself, do I like this because it fits my goals or just because it fits my identity? Because when identity sneaks into decision-making, it clouds the whole process. This is not about eliminating bias. That is impossible. This is about spotting where your choices are getting nudged, softly, invisibly, by your own reflection. And it goes deeper than names. It is about the entire category of self-referencing. When people say things like this product is perfect for people just like you. When ads use the word you more than the actual product name. When a recruiter says we are looking for someone just like you. These are not just compliments. They are cues. Cues designed to activate the part of your brain that wants to belong, that wants to feel chosen, that wants to hear its own name whispered back. So the next time something feels magnetic for no clear reason, stop and ask yourself, is this really what I want? Or does it just sound a little too much like me? Because knowing yourself is powerful, but being blinded by your own name, that is the kind of invisible influence that quietly steers your life while you think you are driving. Once you spot it, you start to see it everywhere. And once you see it everywhere, it starts to lose its power. Forced agreement questions. Have you ever agreed to something without realizing it? Like you're halfway through a conversation, and suddenly you're nodding, smiling, even saying yes to something you never meant to commit to. That's not just social pressure. That's not politeness. That's a trick. A powerful one. It's called the forced agreement question. And once you spot it, you'll realize just how often you've been nudged into saying yes when you should have said nothing at all. Here's how it works. A forced agreement question is designed to trap you in one direction. It sounds like a question, but it is not really a question. It is a setup, a pre-framed statement that puts you in a psychological corner. It sounds like this. You want to succeed, right? You believe in helping people, don't you? You would not want to miss out on this, would you? Harmless on the surface. But every one of those sentences is carefully crafted to make you feel like saying no would make you wrong, selfish, stupid, or even heartless. And your brain hates that feeling, so it agrees, automatically, without thinking. This tactic is used constantly in sales, in manipulation, in marketing, even in fake friendships. You are not being given a real choice. You are being asked a question that has only one socially acceptable answer. And the moment you say yes to that harmless little setup, the person across from you has you right where they want you. Because now they've got commitment. And once your brain commits, even a little, it starts aligning future decisions with that first yes. That is the power of consistency. If you agree that helping people is good, it becomes harder to say no when someone asks you for help. If you agree that smart people take advantage of opportunities, it becomes harder to walk away from a deal. Not because the deal is good, but because you do not want to feel like you just contradicted yourself. That discomfort is called cognitive dissonance. And forced agreement questions are designed to create exactly that tension. They hook your identity to a specific value, then use that value to steer your behavior. And this works even when the questions are subtle. You ever see a survey that asks things like, do you believe in supporting small businesses? Then follows it up with a sales pitch from a small brand. That's not information gathering. That's priming. That's warming you up to say yes later. Because the more times your brain nods, the easier it gets to keep nodding. Momentum builds. Resistance drops. Politicians do it. Cult leaders rely on it. Social media influencers sneak it into their captions and videos all the time. Things like, if you are someone who cares about growth, then you will share this, or only real ones will like this post. It is not just language. It is psychological pressure in disguise. And it is not always malicious. Sometimes people do it without realizing. Like when a friend says you love hanging out, right? Or a partner says you want us to be happy, don't you? These are not innocent. They are soft traps. Because if you disagree, you feel like you are breaking the relationship, like you are rejecting something deeper than the question itself. So your brain folds. You agree. even if it is not how you really feel. Now imagine how many times this has shaped your life. How many yeses you gave because saying no felt rude, or awkward, or like it made you the bad guy. How many decisions you made under the illusion of agreement, when really, you were just being steered. This is how people end up in deals they regret, relationships they never wanted, commitments they were not ready for, because someone asked the right question in the right tone at the right moment, and their brain chose peace over truth. So how do you defend yourself? First, you listen for the setup. If the question feels emotionally loaded, if it carries an assumption inside it, pause. Ask yourself, is this a real question, or is this just a statement in disguise? Would I be able to say no without feeling guilty or ashamed? If the answer is no, it is not a real question. Second, give yourself permission to disagree without defending. You do not owe anyone an explanation for not agreeing with a boxed-in question. You can say maybe. You can say I am not sure. You can say let me think about that. Those are all valid ways to step out of the psychological corner, because forced agreement thrives on urgency and politeness. And when you remove both, the spell breaks. You take back control. The people who use this tactic the most are usually the ones who are most afraid of a real no. They do not want your honest opinion. They want your conditioned compliance, your reflexive approval. But you are not a reflex. You are not a predictable yes machine. You are a person, with values, with judgment, and with the right to pause before every decision. So the next time someone asks you a question that feels a little too easy to agree with, ask yourself this: is this really my yes? Or is it just their setup? Distraction in persuasion. Ever notice how magicians never actually hide anything? They just make you look in the wrong place. That is the trick, not disappearance. Distraction. And the scary part is, this exact same principle is being used against you every single day, but not to entertain you, to persuade you. Here is how it works. When someone wants to change your mind, or sell you something, or manipulate your choice, they do not need to overpower your logic. They just need to overwhelm your attention. Because if your focus is looking one way, they can do whatever they want in the other direction, and you will not even realize it happened. It's not about being tricked. It's about being too distracted to notice. Let's say you are shopping for a new phone. The salesperson starts going off about the camera, the incredible zoom, the night mode, all these dazzling features. You get caught up in it. You start picturing the shots you will take, the videos you will post. But you never notice the battery life is trash. You never see that it only comes with limited storage, because your brain was too busy getting hyped about megapixels. That is distraction as persuasion. The tactic is simple. Flood your senses with irrelevant details so you stop asking the important questions. Politicians do it constantly. A scandal breaks, and suddenly they start tweeting about a new law, or blaming a rival, or bringing up something completely unrelated but emotionally charged. And just like that, the public eye moves. Headlines change, the fire burns out, not because the truth was handled, but because the attention was redirected. This is not rare. It is strategic. Distraction is not a mistake in persuasion. It is a feature. The human brain has limited cognitive bandwidth. You can only focus on so many things at once. So if I want to sell you a weak idea, I can just surround it with noise, pretty visuals, emotional stories, loud music, complicated words, anything to make you feel like something is happening while keeping your critical thinking asleep. Even in arguments, This happens all the time. You bring up a clear, logical point, and instead of addressing it, the other person starts talking about your tone. Or they pivot to a totally different issue. Or they make it personal, and suddenly the conversation is no longer about the idea. It's about defending yourself, and you lose the original ground without realizing it. That's distraction in its purest form. And it works because the brain loves closure. It loves to resolve what is in front of it. If I show you a problem that is hard to think about, then quickly flash another one that is easier and more emotional, you will jump to the second one every time. You will solve the wrong problem just to feel like you made a decision, and the person who gave you the distraction, they win. Marketers call this attention redirection. In debate, it is known as a smokescreen. In psychology, it is cognitive overload. But the result is always the same. You miss what matters most because your attention got hijacked by something that felt more urgent or exciting or dramatic. And the worst part, you do not even feel manipulated. You feel informed, entertained, empowered, because distraction done well does not feel like noise. It feels like clarity. It feels like engagement. And that is the trap. You think you are choosing. You think you are thinking. But you are not. You are reacting. So how do you fight back? You start by slowing down. The faster something makes you feel, the slower you need to think. If an ad or an argument is throwing 100 things at you at once, pause and ask, what are they not talking about? What are they steering me away from? You will be shocked how often the real issue is hiding in plain sight, just slightly outside the frame they want you to look at. This works in everyday situations too. Ever notice when someone brings up a serious topic and the other person cracks a joke or changes the subject? That is not just awkwardness. That is an emotional redirect. Your brain wants to follow the laugh. But if you are paying attention, you can see it for what it is. Avoidance wrapped in charm. Persuasion is not just about adding ideas. It is about controlling where attention goes. And the better someone is at holding your attention in one spot, the easier it is for them to slip something else past you. Think of your attention like a flashlight in a dark room. Most people just aim it where they are told. But once you realize you can point it anywhere, you stop falling for the show. You start seeing the edges, the missing pieces, the unspoken truths. That is how you stay in control. Because distraction only works on minds that are too busy to question what they are seeing. And once you learn to slow the moment down, to ask what is missing, persuasion gets weaker. The illusion starts to fade. And just like in a magic show, once you know where to look, the trick stops working. Anchoring effect. You ever wonder why the first number you hear in a conversation feels like it sets the tone for everything that follows? Like once someone says a price, or a time, or a value, your brain just can't let go of it, even if it makes no sense. That is not an accident. That is the anchoring effect. And it shapes more of your life than you'd ever expect. Let's start simple. You walk into a store. You see a pair of shoes marked down from 200 to 90. Your brain lights up. That is over 100 in savings. That must be a deal. You feel smart for grabbing it. But here is the problem. Those shoes might have never been worth 200 in the first place. That original number, that first high price you saw, it was the anchor. It hooked your brain and made 90 feel reasonable, even if it wasn't. Anchoring is one of the most subtle and powerful tools in persuasion. It works because your brain loves reference points. It needs something to compare to. And once it latches onto the first piece of information it gets, it builds everything else around that. Even if that first piece is random, even if it is completely meaningless, here is the part that messes with you. The anchor does not have to be relevant to work. In one experiment, people were asked to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number. Then they were shown a random item, like a bottle of wine or a piece of tech, and asked how much they would pay for it. People with higher 2-digit numbers consistently gave higher price estimates. Why? Because their brains anchored to those numbers. It had nothing to do with the product. But the reference point stuck. That is how irrational anchoring is. This happens in dating, in negotiations, in job interviews. Someone throws out a number or a value early, and even if it's ridiculous, it starts shaping expectations. If the first salary you hear is $70,000, your brain reacts differently than if it had heard 91st. Even if the job is the exact same. Because that first number did not just inform you, it steered you. You get anchored every time you shop online. A product shows 5 stars, hundreds of reviews, limited time discount. That first impression acts like a stake in the ground. It frames what comes next, even the words they use. Premium, luxury, best-selling, those are linguistic anchors. They frame your expectations before you even think about what you actually need. And once the frame is in place, your brain fills in the rest. You start defending the price. You rationalize why it makes sense. You talk yourself into it, not because it fits your budget or your values, but because it feels better than the first number you saw. It feels like a win. Anchoring is also used in politics. You hear phrases like record, breaking, unprecedented, lowest ever. These words plant emotional anchors. They set a tone that guides how you interpret the actual date of, if you ever get to it. Because by the time you are thinking critically, your brain already has a reference point, and it does not want to let go. This even happens in conversations. Someone says that a person is dangerous or brilliant or annoying right at the start, and your brain clings to that first impression. Even if they later prove to be the opposite, that first word was the anchor, and it shapes everything after. And here is the kicker. The anchoring effect is not just something that happens to people who are gullible or uninformed. It happens to everyone. Even experts, even professionals. It is built into the way our brains process information. We are not designed to make decisions in a vacuum. We are designed to compare, to contrast, to judge based on context. And whoever controls the context controls the decision. So how do you fight back? You learn to spot the anchor. Anytime you see a price slashed down, a number thrown out first, or a claim that feels a little too extreme, ask yourself, is this a fact, or is this just an anchor? Am I reacting to truth, or to the first thing that grabbed my attention? And then you re-anchor yourself. Create your own baseline. What would this cost without the hype? What is it worth to me based on my values, not theirs? What do I actually need, without the emotional pull of the first number? Because the moment you choose your own anchor, their manipulation loses its grip. You are not supposed to be passive. You are not supposed to be led by invisible numbers. You are supposed to lead your own decisions. But that only happens when you realize how often your focus is being hijacked from the start. Not by force, but by framing, by priming, by planting one loud, sticky number in your brain and letting it echo through the rest of your thoughts. Anchoring works because it hides in plain sight. Once you know it's there, you can pause before reacting. You can question what you are comparing things to. And you can finally decide what actually makes sense, not what just feels like a deal. And that changes everything. Halo effect. You ever meet someone who's insanely attractive or charming or just really good at one thing? And before you know it, you are assuming they are probably smart, kind, trustworthy, and successful too. You do not know why. It just feels true. That is the halo effect, and it is one of the sneakiest psychological tricks in the world. Here is what is really going on. Your brain is lazy, not stupid, just efficient. It wants to take shortcuts wherever it can. So when it notices one positive trait, like beauty, confidence, or a calm voice, it assumes the rest of the traits must match. One glow spills over into everything else. That is the halo. A single quality casts a shine that covers the whole person. And this does not just happen with people. It happens with brands, with leaders, with public figures. You see one polished ad, or hear one powerful speech, or notice one high-end design, and suddenly, your brain connects that to quality, reliability, authority, even if none of those things have been proven. Even if all you saw was a pretty surface. It happens constantly in hiring. Someone shows up looking sharp, speaking clearly, acting confident. Boom. You assume they are competent. You trust them more. You are more forgiving if they mess up. You fill in the blanks with positive assumptions because of one trait. Meanwhile, someone else might be more skilled but less polished. And they get overlooked because their glow did not hit first. Same with celebrities. An actor plays a heroic role in a movie, and suddenly people trust their opinions on politics, medicine, or life advice. Their on-screen charm becomes real-world credibility. That is the halo effect. It is emotional gravity. One quality pulls everything else into its orbit, and once that glow is in place, it is incredibly hard to break. This is why you might ignore red flags in people you like. That one thing they do really well blinds you to the things they do wrong. You defend them, you justify their actions, not because you are naive, but because your brain is wired to believe that good equals good. One good thing means they must be good overall. But that is not how people work. You can be confident and still be dishonest. You can be talented and still be toxic. You can be beautiful and still be selfish. The traits do not come bundled. But your brain thinks they do. That is the trap. Marketers weaponize this every day. They pay attractive people to promote products because they know your brain will transfer the beauty onto the brand. They use sleek packaging because they know you will assume the product inside is better. They throw impressive statistics at you, not to inform, but to create a glow. Because once that glow is set, your judgment goes soft. This even happens with voice. Someone speaks in a calm, deep, measured tone, and suddenly they sound more trustworthy. Not because their ideas are better, but because their delivery triggered the halo effect. And your brain said, well, if they sound confident, they must know what they are talking about. And this trick works both ways. The opposite is called the horn effect. When you notice one negative trait, and you start assuming everything else must be negative too. That person was rude once, so they are probably lazy, unreliable, untrustworthy. One bad moment poisons the rest, and that is just as dangerous, because now your perception is being filtered through one emotional lens, not reality. So how do you protect yourself? You slow down your judgment. You break the glow. When you catch yourself overly impressed by someone or something, ask, what exactly am I responding to right now? Is it one trait, or the whole picture? Am I seeing clearly, or am I being blinded by shine? You have to separate the parts. Someone can be charismatic and still be full of it. Someone can be great at one thing and clueless in another. A brand can look premium and still be garbage underneath. Your job is to resist the temptation to let one quality dominate the rest. It takes effort. Because the halo effect feels good, it makes the world easier to process. Good people are all good, bad people are all bad. But that is not real. Real people are mixed. Real products are nuanced. And real thinking requires more than emotional shortcuts. That does not mean you should be skeptical of everything. It just means you should notice when your judgment feels too smooth, too automatic, when your brain is giving someone a free pass. Stop and dig. What are they actually showing you? What are they hiding behind the glow? The halo effect is not just a bias. It is a tool people use to manipulate perception, to earn trust they have not earned, to get agreement they do not deserve. And the more you fall for it, the more influence they have over your decisions, without ever proving anything real. So when someone seems perfect, pause. Look past the polish. Separate the charm from the character, because once you learn to break the halo, you start seeing people and choices for what they actually are, not just how they shine. False equivalence framing. Ever hear two sides of an argument and think they both sound equally valid, even though deep down something feels off? Like the facts are not really matching up, but the way it is presented makes you second-guess yourself. That is not your logic failing. That is false equivalence framing, and it is one of the most manipulative tricks in modern communication. Here is how it works. Instead of proving something is right, a person will just make it sound equal to something else, not better, not worse, just equal, same level, same weight, same credibility. But here is the trap. They are comparing things that are not actually alike, not in depth, not in context, not in consequences, but because it sounds balanced on the surface. Your brain starts treating it like a fair debate, and that is when the manipulation begins. This tactic is used all the time in politics. One side does something dangerous or corrupt, and instead of defending it, their supporters say, "Yeah, but the other side did this too." They bring up a different incident with different facts in a different context and pretend the two are the same, just to level the emotional playing field, just to make the serious thing feel less serious. It does not matter if one was a misdemeanor and the other was a crime, or one was a single comment and the other was a long-term policy. The goal is not truth. The goal is to blur the lines, to flatten the difference between harm and opinion, between impact and intention. And your brain, which loves symmetry and balance, goes along with it. That is the danger. This trick hijacks your sense of fairness. It makes you hesitate to take a side, even when the truth is clear, because no one wants to feel biased. No one wants to seem unfair. So when someone frames a situation like both sides are doing the same thing, your first instinct is to believe them, not because the facts are equal, but because the framing makes it feel that way. And the people using this trick know exactly what they are doing. They do not need to prove their side is good. They just need to make the other side look just as bad. It is the lazy way to win a debate, and it works frighteningly well. This shows up in the media too. A network might bring on two guests with completely different levels of expertise, but present them like they are equals. One person has 20 years of research, the other just has opinions and a loud voice. But they are put in the same chairs, asked the same questions, given the same airtime. And the audience walks away thinking the issue is 50-50, but it is not. That kind of framing does not inform you. It confuses you. It creates the illusion of balance without delivering any clarity. Even in personal arguments, people use this all the time. You confront someone for lying, and they respond with, "Yeah, well, you raised your voice," as if those things carry the same weight, as if emotional tone and intentional deception are somehow interchangeable. They are not. But when you are in the heat of the moment, that kind of false mirror can throw you off. It feels like they made a point. But they didn't. They just distracted you with a sideways comparison. This is false equivalence. It is comparing a paper cut to a stab wound. It is saying being rude is just as bad as being violent. It is pretending that mistakes and manipulation deserve the same response. And if you are not paying attention, you will nod along. You will give equal attention to things that are not equally important. And that is exactly how the truth gets lost, because truth does not always live in the middle. Sometimes one side is actually worse. Sometimes one idea actually causes more harm. But the moment you let framing flatten everything into symmetry, you stop asking better questions. You stop thinking in terms of nuance, impact, history, or consequence. And now the person who used that trick, they are off the hook. Not because they made a real argument, but because they forced a false tie. So how do you fight this? You start by rejecting lazy comparisons. When someone says it is just like something else, ask how, ask where, ask when. Demand specifics, because real equivalence requires more than surface similarities. It needs context. It needs scale. It needs details. You also trust your discomfort. That weird gut feeling that something does not add up. Listen to it. When two things are being called equal, but one clearly caused more damage, or required more intent, or carries more weight, that is your sign. That is where you dig. This is not about picking a side. This is about protecting your judgment, refusing to be fooled by rhetorical tricks, refusing to treat opinion and evidence like they belong on the same level just because someone says they do. Because if everyone is right, then no one is. If everything is equal, then nothing has meaning. False equivalence is not balance. It is manipulation dressed up as fairness. And once you learn to spot it, you start seeing how many arguments, headlines, and debates are built on nothing but emotional symmetry and empty comparisons. You deserve better than that. Your mind is sharper than that. So next time someone tries to even the scale without real weight, flip it over. Break the frame, and look at what is actually there. Reciprocity Exploit. Ever get a free sample at a store, then feel weirdly obligated to buy something afterward? You tell yourself it is just a taste, no strings attached, but 5 minutes later you are holding a product you never meant to buy. That is not generosity. That is a psychological trap, and it is called the reciprocity exploit. This is not some innocent social norm. This is one of the oldest tricks in the influence playbook. You give someone something small, a favor, a compliment, a gift, and suddenly they feel pressure to give something back, not because they want to, because their brain has been socially programmed to return the gesture. Even if the original gesture was calculated, even if it was bait, your sense of fairness is not a flaw. It is actually a powerful instinct. Humans survive better in groups, and reciprocity keeps those groups stable. I help you, you help me. That is the emotional glue of trust. But when someone uses that instinct to manipulate you into compliance, that is when reciprocity becomes a weapon, and they do it everywhere. Walk into a high-end perfume store. Before you even ask, someone sprays a fragrance on a card and hands it to you, smiling, no pressure, just here, enjoy this. A few minutes later, they offer you a sample bottle, still smiling, still free, but now your brain is firing. You feel warm toward them. You feel like they went out of their way, and without realizing it, you start looking for a way to even the scale. That way is often your wallet. It happens in online marketing too. A company gives you a free ebook, a free trial, a discount code. You think you are winning. But the real goal is not to give you value. The real goal is to create a subtle debt, to flip the balance of power. Now you feel like they deserve your attention, your purchase, your loyalty, not because of the product, because of the psychology. Even compliments get used this way. Someone flatters you, tells you how insightful you are, how rare your skills are, how fun you are to talk to. And minutes later they are pitching you something, or asking for a favor, or nudging you toward a yes you were not planning to give. You feel a tug inside. You do not want to say no to someone who just made you feel good. That is reciprocity, and it is being pulled like a lever. This happens in relationships too. One partner does something thoughtful, and the other feels pressure to give in on something else. It becomes a trade, but not always a fair one, not always a kind one. Sometimes people give just enough to earn emotional currency, and then spend it to get their way. Over and over. And here is the crazy part. Even when you know it is happening, it still works. Even if you can see the trick, your emotional wiring does not shut off. You still feel that urge to balance the books. That urge is not logic. It is deep social programming. We feel uncomfortable owing anyone anything, even when we never asked for the gift. That is what makes this exploit so effective. Because it does not feel like pressure. It feels like politeness. It feels like being a good person. But it is not. It is engineered guilt. It is artificial obligation. And once someone gets you into that state, they can push you further than you meant to go. So how do you stop it? You start by noticing when something is given to you with too much enthusiasm, when a gift or gesture feels oddly timed, when it seems like a little too much for a stranger. Pause. Ask yourself, would this person still be this generous if there was no chance I would say yes to them? If I walked away right now with no response, would they still feel good about helping me? Because if the answer is no, then it was never a gift. It was bait. The second step is separating the gesture from the ask. Just because someone gave you something does not mean you owe them your time, your money, or your energy. You can appreciate the gesture without feeling trapped by it. Say thank you. Walk away, no guilt. This is not about being rude. It is about being clear. Your decisions should not be built on invisible pressure or subconscious guilt. They should be built on your values, your needs, your goals. And here is what really flips the power dynamic. When you learn to give with no strings attached, when you give someone something and expect nothing in return, no sale, no yes, no favor, that is real generosity. And people can feel the difference. They trust you more because they are not being cornered. They are being respected. That is the irony of this trick. The fake version gets quick wins. The real version builds lasting influence. So next time you feel that weird pressure after someone gives you something, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself who is really in control right now. Is this a moment of kindness? Or is it a setup? Because once you know how the reciprocity exploit works, it stops working on you. And you start making choices from clarity, not guilt. Fear appeal. There is a certain kind of message that grabs your attention without asking. It grabs your gut. It does not reason with you. It rattles you. It tells you if you do not act now, something bad will happen. Something painful. Something irreversible. That is a fear appeal, and you are seeing it way more often than you think. This tactic is not about logic. It is not about information. It is about hijacking your nervous system. It works because fear bypasses your thinking brain and dives straight into your survival system. The part of you that reacts, not reflects, and when someone can get in there, they can push you into almost anything. Buy this, click this, vote this way, obey, react, comply. Not because you want to, because you are afraid of what might happen if you don't. Fear appeal does not try to convince you with evidence. It throws you into a mental movie, a worst-case scenario, and it tells you there is only one way to escape it. Their way. You see it in marketing all the time. A skincare ad shows someone aging rapidly, then flashes a product like a lifeline. Insurance companies show homes destroyed by floods, cars crumpled from accidents, families sobbing, then offer a simple way to feel safe again. That is not just strategy. That is precision emotional engineering. The message is not "this will help you." It is "if you do not buy this, something will go wrong. And here is the thing, it works." That is why everyone uses it. Because fear sells. Fear sticks. Fear short-circuits critical thinking. And it works even better when the fear is vague. Something bad is coming. Something dangerous is out there. Something might happen to your kids, your money, your body, your future. When the fear is vague, your mind fills in the blanks. You make it personal. You make it real. And suddenly you are reacting emotionally to a threat that may not even exist. Fear appeal also plays out in politics. It is one of the most powerful tools for controlling the masses. A politician does not need to promise a better future. They just need to convince you the other side will destroy everything. Your way of life, your safety, your freedom. It becomes a battle of who can scare you more, not who can lead you better. And it is not always a lie. Sometimes the fear is based on something real. But even when it is, it still gets twisted, exaggerated, weaponized. Because the goal is not to inform. The goal is to rush your judgment, push you into decisions while your logic is still trying to catch up. And here is where it gets even darker. Fear can be contagious. You see people around you panicking. You start to panic. You do not want to be the one who gets caught unprepared. So you follow. You comply. You give up control just to make the anxiety stop. That is how fear spreads. Not just through facts, but through tone, volume, urgency. You hear it in the way people speak. They do not say "here is a risk." They say "this will happen." They do not say "you might be affected." They say "you are in danger." Right now. And the moment your brain hears that, it starts rehearsing loss, and pain, and shame. You feel vulnerable, and you look for anything that feels like safety. So how do you defend yourself from this? First, you have to notice the emotional shift. If a message suddenly makes your stomach tighten, your chest feel heavy, your breathing shallow, pause. That is a sign. Your body is reacting to fear. That means your decision-making is about to get hijacked. Step 1 is catching that moment before it snowballs. Step 2 is asking a very specific question. What is the actual threat? Not the emotion, not the tone. What are they saying will actually happen? To who? When? How likely is it? Is this fear grounded in truth, or is it being used to steer me? Most of the time, fear appeal does not come with clarity. It comes with intensity. So when you slow down and ask for details, the illusion starts to fall apart. You can also ask, what are they trying to sell me right now? It might be a product, it might be a belief, it might be a choice. But fear appeal is never neutral. It is always steering you away from something, toward something else. That is the power of it, because fear makes you want relief, and relief makes you grab the first answer that feels safe. Not the best answer, just the fastest escape. And here is the twist. Fear is not always wrong, but if someone needs to scare you into listening, it usually means their ideas cannot stand on their own. If their truth was strong enough, it would not need panic. It would not need trembling music and red flashing words and threats hiding behind smiles. It would just speak clearly. So next time someone uses fear to get your attention, pause. Before you believe it, before you act on it, before you let your body make decisions your mind never agreed to, ask yourself, is this fear protecting me or controlling me? Because once you learn to tell the difference, you start making choices out of power, not panic. Social proof engineering. You ever walk past a restaurant and see a long line outside, and even if you were not hungry, something in you thinks it must be good. Or maybe you scroll through a product online, and the first thing you check is the number of reviews. 5 stars. 10,000 people bought this. That is all it takes. You are sold. You did not even need to think. That is not instinct. That is social proof being engineered around you. And it is not subtle. It is everywhere. Because if enough people appear to believe something, your brain starts treating it like truth, like safety, like the path of least resistance. And marketers, influencers, politicians, even your coworkers, they know how to rig that game. Social proof is not about facts. It is about behavior. It is the invisible voice in your head saying, look, they are doing it, so it must be the right thing. Your brain evolved to trust the crowd. When we lived in tribes, going against the group could get you left behind or worse. So following the group became linked to survival. It became automatic. But now, people are using that ancient reflex to control modern decisions. Think about fake followers. Why do influencers buy them? Because even if their content is weak, the appearance of popularity makes them look credible. People see big numbers and assume value, assume authority, assume importance. It does not matter how they got the followers. All that matters is the perception, and that perception changes your behavior. You might like their post. You might follow them back. You might even buy what they are selling. Not because you love it, but because it feels like everyone else already does. That is not coincidence. That is manufacturing social proof. Retail stores do this too. A sign that says bestseller. Staff picks, only 2 left. The shelf is half empty. And now, you are not just browsing. You are leaning towards something that feels validated, chosen, trusted. And you never even asked yourself if it was actually better, because your brain is shortcutting the process. Crowds mean comfort. Reviews mean truth. Popularity means value. That is the illusion, and it runs deep. You see it in the way people talk online. Look at the comments. Look at the likes. If a take gets enough attention, people stop challenging it. They start copying it, sharing it, quoting it. Not because it is right, but because it feels socially confirmed. This is how bad ideas go viral. Not because they are convincing, because they are repeated, seen, liked, framed as accepted. Social proof makes silence look like agreement, even when most people are just too tired or too unsure to push back. And once that illusion is in place, it gets harder to think independently. You do not want to be the outlier. You do not want to be the only one asking questions. Because what if you are wrong? What if everyone else is already on board? And that is exactly the pressure this tactic is built to create. Engineered social proof is not about showing you the truth. It is about surrounding you with the illusion of certainty. It is not about earning trust. It is about faking consensus. And once you feel that consensus, you stop thinking, you start following. So how do they pull it off? They show you the numbers. 10 million views, 5,000 comments, this many sold in the last hour. Even if those numbers are inflated, even if they are out of context, they frame the moment to look popular. They show you testimonials, faces, names, voices, but you do not know who those people are. You do not know what they were promised. You do not know if they were paid. You just see the pattern, and your brain starts doing the math. If all these people believe, maybe I should too. They build fake urgency. Flash sales with trending now tags. Pop-ups showing names of people who just bought. It is all designed to make you feel like the train is moving and you are about to miss it. And when it works, you act without hesitation. Because when it feels like everyone else has already decided, the pressure to join in becomes almost physical. But here is the twist. True social proof is earned. It comes from real people sharing real experiences over time. The engineered kind skips that. It creates the illusion of trust before trust ever existed. And if you are not careful, you end up chasing what is popular instead of what is right. You end up trusting the crowd more than your own gut. So here is how you break the cycle. Slow down your decision just long enough to ask where the proof is actually coming from. Is it organic? Or is it staged? Are the numbers transparent or suspiciously round? Are the reviews detailed and specific, or are they just vague praise copied and pasted? Also check your emotion. Do you feel calm and curious? Or are you rushing? Are you afraid of missing out? Are you chasing approval? That feeling is your signal. Because when a choice feels urgent, validated, and effortless all at once, someone might be engineering that moment. And once you see the scaffolding behind the popularity, it loses its grip. You start thinking for yourself again. You stop following the crowd and start asking why the crowd is moving that way in the first place. And just like that, the illusion fades. And what is left is a choice that actually belongs to you. Bandwagon effect. You ever notice how the moment something starts trending, people suddenly act like they loved it all along? A song hits #1. A brand goes viral. A celebrity says one thing, and suddenly that opinion is everywhere. People don't stop to ask if they actually agree. They just join in. That is not taste. That is not timing. That is the bandwagon effect. This trick plays out quietly. It doesn't shove you. It doesn't scream at you. It whispers, everyone else is doing it. And your brain, without your permission, starts nodding. Because being part of the group feels safe. Going against the group feels risky. Even if the group is going nowhere. The bandwagon effect is why movements explode overnight. It is how opinions swing in a matter of hours. Not because people deeply change their minds, but because they do not want to be left out or left behind. So they jump on, even if they have no idea where the ride is going. Marketers love this effect. They know if they can make something look like the popular choice, people will follow. That is why you see labels like bestseller, most loved, trending now. Not because it is necessarily better, but because your brain thinks if other people picked it, it must be good. It shows up in politics too. A candidate gains a little momentum, and suddenly more people support them. Not because of new ideas, but because people want to bet on the winner. The energy builds on itself. The more people believe, the more people believe. It is not just buying. It is not just voting. It is identity. You see a fashion trend that looked ridiculous a month ago. Suddenly, it is everywhere. Now you feel like you are the one out of touch. You start warming up to it, not because it changed, but because everyone else changed around you. That is how fast the bandwagon effect can rewire your taste. It turns you into a mirror. You reflect whatever the crowd seems to value. And the scariest part is, you often do not know it is happening. Your brain wants to fit in. That is baked into you from the beginning. In ancient times, being alone meant being vulnerable. So evolution shaped us to avoid standing out too much, to pay attention to what the tribe approves of, to shift our preferences to match theirs. That used to keep us alive. Now it keeps us buying stuff we do not need, believing things we never questioned, posting things we do not even understand. Social media pours fuel on this. You see likes piling up, comments flooding in, a post blowing up. You are drawn to it, not because of what it says, but because of the crowd around it. That crowd creates gravity. It pulls you in, you react faster, you think less, you agree more. That is the trap, because the bandwagon effect does not just shape what you do. It shapes what you pretend to believe. It shapes what you convince yourself you like. Just to stay on the right side of the crowd, you might even suppress your actual opinion just to avoid friction. You feel something is off, but you go quiet because everyone else is clapping. And here is where it gets dangerous. Once a belief hits that critical mass, people stop debating it. They stop examining it. It becomes sacred, untouchable, even if it is wrong, even if it is harmful. Because questioning it now means questioning the group. And nobody wants to be the first one off the bus. But here is what nobody tells you. The bandwagon does not need to be full. It just needs to look full. That is why numbers get inflated. Followers get bought. Trends get seeded by bots. It is not about real influence. It is about the illusion of momentum. Because if it looks like everyone is already on board, your brain skips the thinking and jumps straight to compliance. So how do you resist it? You pause before you join. You check the instinct to agree. You ask yourself, do I actually like this? Or do I just want to belong? You watch for the pressure. That little voice that says, I do not want to be the only one who disagrees. That is the sign. That is the moment the bandwagon is trying to pull you in. You also remember, crowds are not always wise. Just because something is popular does not make it true. And just because people are clapping does not mean the idea deserves applause. Real confidence is being able to stand alone when it matters. Not because you enjoy conflict, but because you trust your own judgment more than the crowd's momentum. That does not mean you ignore trends. It means you investigate them. You ask why they exist. Who benefits? What is missing? Because sometimes what everyone believes is just what everyone copied. A loop, a performance, an echo of an echo. And the moment you see it clearly, you are free from it. You stop needing to keep up. You stop needing to blend in. You stop needing to agree just because the majority did. And that is when your choices become real again. Mirroring for trust. You ever meet someone for the first time and feel like you just click instantly? The way they talk, the way they nod, the way they smile at the right moments. It all feels familiar. Comfortable, like they just get you. But here is the thing. That connection might not be real. It might be manufactured. That is the power of mirroring. Mirroring is when someone subtly copies your body language, your tone, your pace, even your words, all to make you feel like you are in sync. And most of the time, you do not even notice it, but your brain does, and it starts labeling that person as safe, as likable, as trustworthy. This trick does not shout. It blends in. It hides in plain sight, and it is one of the most effective ways to get someone to open up, agree, or comply, because it creates this invisible sense of we are alike. And when people feel like you are alike, they stop resisting. They start relaxing. They want to say yes. This is not just theory. Your brain is wired for this. There is a network of neurons called mirror neurons, and they fire when you see someone do something you relate to. Someone leans in, you lean in. Someone lowers their voice, you lower yours. It creates a feedback loop, a silent conversation beneath the real one. And the wild part is, it works even if you know it is happening. That is why negotiators use it, salespeople, lawyers, interrogators. Anyone trained to win trust quickly knows how to mirror without getting caught. It starts small. If you cross your arms, they wait a beat and do the same. You laugh. They chuckle. You use a certain phrase. They repeat it back. You feel seen, understood. But what you are really experiencing is engineered rapport. Mirroring can happen physically, but it also works verbally. You describe something a certain way. They reflect that exact language. You say a problem is frustrating. They say, yeah, that sounds frustrating. You call something overwhelming. They say, I can see how that would feel overwhelming. They are not adding new information. They are repeating you. But because your words are coming back to you, it feels validating. And validation builds trust. It can even go deeper. Some people mirror your emotional state. You sound excited. They get excited. You sound upset. They slow down, lower their voice, match your energy. Suddenly it feels like they are emotionally on your side. And that makes you let your guard down. Because mirroring is not about logic. It is about belonging, familiarity. We are tribal creatures. When someone reflects us back to ourselves, it triggers a primal comfort. It feels like connection. And once that illusion is set, influence becomes easy. You are more likely to agree with someone who mirrors you, more likely to disclose personal info, more likely to see them as credible, even if you just met them, even if they are faking it. And yes, it can be completely faked. There are entire books, entire courses on how to mirror people to gain trust. It is taught in corporate sales, in pickup artistry, in politics, because once someone likes you, they stop questioning you. And once they stop questioning, you can steer the conversation wherever you want. This trick is so effective, it can override common sense. You might say yes to something you are not sure about, just because the person asking made you feel seen. You might walk away from a conversation thinking, wow, we really connected, not realizing they were subtly matching every move you made. Now, not all mirroring is manipulative. Sometimes it happens naturally. Friends do it. Couples do it. People who truly connect tend to sync up without effort. That is real rapport. But the manipulative version is when someone does it deliberately, just to get something from you. So how do you spot it? First, watch for patterns. Is the person matching your every move a little too perfectly? Are they adopting your tone, your slang, your rhythm almost instantly? That can be a clue. Second, test the waters. Shift your posture. Slow down your speech. Use a strange word. See if they follow. If they do, and it keeps happening, you might be getting mirrored. Also, check how quickly the connection feels strong. Real trust takes time. If you feel like someone just gets you 5 minutes into meeting them, pause. That instant comfort might not be earned. It might be constructed, and if you are using mirroring, ask yourself why. Are you trying to connect, or are you trying to control? Because mirroring is powerful. When used with integrity, it builds bridges. It helps people feel safe, feel heard. But when used as a tactic, it becomes a mask, a way to manipulate emotions without actually caring about the person behind them. And here is the twist. The best relationships do not come from perfect mirroring. They come from honesty. From moments when you are not trying to match someone. You are just being real with them. So the next time someone feels a little too in sync, a little too agreeable, a little too much like you, pay attention. You might be looking at your own reflection, and the person holding up the mirror might be doing it for a reason. Choice overload trap. You ever stand in front of a shelf packed with options, 20 brands of the same thing, and feel completely frozen? You walk in for one item, and suddenly your brain is running in circles. This one has better packaging. That one is cheaper. This one says organic. That one says best-selling. You start comparing, hesitating, doubting, and sometimes you just walk away with nothing. That is not indecision. That is the choice overload trap. More options sound like freedom. That is the trick. The more choices you see, the more you believe you are in control. But what actually happens is the opposite. Your brain locks up. It gets overwhelmed. And you make worse decisions, or none at all. This is not a glitch. It is how your brain protects itself, because every decision burns energy. Mentally, emotionally, you are evaluating risk, comparing outcomes, trying to avoid regret. And when there are too many paths in front of you, the fear of picking the wrong one gets louder than everything else. Marketers know this. They know that giving you too many options can confuse you just long enough to push you toward whatever they want you to pick. Here is how it works. Let's say you are on a website looking for headphones. Page after page of nearly identical products. Different colors, different models, some with 10 reviews, some with 10,000. You read one, then another, then another. And instead of getting clearer, you feel more stuck. That is not bad design. That is engineered paralysis. And it leads to one of two outcomes. You either panic, buy something that feels safe, even if it is overpriced, or you leave the site completely exhausted and empty-handed. Either way, the overload hijacked your judgment, and this trap shows up everywhere. Streaming platforms drown you in content, so you spend more time scrolling than watching. Menace give you 30 meal options, so you keep flipping pages while your hunger builds. You end up picking something random just to escape the decision itself. Too many choices does not empower you. It distracts you. And the more options you see, the more regret you feel afterward, because you are haunted by what you did not choose. What if the other one was better? What if you missed out? That feeling eats away at your satisfaction. And this is where it gets even trickier. Companies will flood you with variety, then guide you toward the one they profit from most. They know you are tired. They know your brain wants an easy out, so they make one option just a little more appealing, a little more visible, and your overloaded brain goes, fine, that one. But you never actually chose it with clarity. You were steered there, even in simple decisions. Which gym to join, what plan to subscribe to, what skincare product to buy. Too many options dilute your standards. You stop asking what you actually need. You start asking what most people pick, or what looks the least confusing. You default to easy. Not because you are lazy, but because your mental energy is not infinite, and choice overload drains it fast. Now here is the twist. This trap is not about the number of choices. It is about the illusion of importance. The more choices you see, the more significant the decision feels. Even if it is not, that fake weight makes you second-guess everything. It makes tiny decisions feel huge. And when your brain thinks the stakes are high, it freaks out. It overanalyzes. It stalls. And you spiral. You think you are just being careful. But what is really happening is mental gridlock. So how do you avoid this trap? You start by limiting your inputs. Not everything deserves your attention. If you are picking a toothpaste, you do not need to read 30 reviews. Set a time limit. Set a filter. Reduce the noise. Second, ask what actually matters to you. Not what looks flashy. Not what most people are picking. What do you need? What fits your life? Strip the decision down to its core purpose. Third, stop fearing regret. You will never know what the perfect option was, but most of the time, good enough is truly good enough. Satisfaction comes more from commitment than perfection. And finally, notice when choice overload is being used against you. If a company is throwing a wall of options in your face, ask yourself why. Is it to help you, or to confuse you just enough to guide you toward their preferred outcome? The second you recognize that pattern, the spell breaks, because clarity does not come from more options. It comes from fewer distractions. And once you reclaim that clarity, decisions become less about anxiety and more about intention. You are no longer chasing the best choice. You are making the right one for you. And that small shift, that tiny bit of awareness, is what pulls you out of the trap. Confirmation bias exploitation. You know that feeling when you read something online and immediately think, yup, I knew it. It lines up perfectly with what you already believe, and suddenly it feels like truth. Not because it was proven, but because it agrees with you. That right there is confirmation bias. And if someone wants to control how you think, it is one of the easiest tools they can use. Because people are not really looking for the truth. Most of the time, they are looking for evidence that they were already right. This bias sits quietly in your brain. It filters what you notice, what you remember, what you trust, and the more you believe something, the more proof you start seeing everywhere, even if that proof is shaky or completely made up. That is why two people can read the same article and walk away with totally opposite conclusions, because they are not reading it to learn. They are reading it to reinforce, to feel more certain, more validated, and that makes you extremely easy to influence. All someone has to do is tell you what you already believe, or hint at it, and your defenses drop. You start nodding. You start trusting them. You stop questioning their motives. They do not need facts. They just need familiarity. This is how people get sucked into echo chambers. Their news feed starts reflecting their opinions. Their social media shows more of what they like. The algorithm learns what makes them react, and it serves up more of the same. Over time, they are not exploring the world. They are reinforcing a worldview. And the scary part is, they feel more informed, not less. They say, see, this proves it. But what it really proves is how good the system is at feeding their bias. This is not just politics. It happens in relationships, in work, in daily choices. If you think someone dislikes you, every neutral action starts looking hostile. If you think a product is a scam, every small flaw confirms it. If you believe you are bad at something, you ignore all the times you did it well and obsess over the one mistake. You shape your reality to fit the story you already believe. And that makes you predictable. It makes you exploitable. Because if a marketer, a politician, or a manipulator knows what you want to hear, they do not need to convince you. They just need to echo you. They tell you the system is rigged, that your group is smarter, that the other side is lying, that the science agrees with you, that the facts are on your side, and it feels so good to hear that. You stop looking deeper. Even conspiracy theories thrive on this. They start with a seed of doubt, then feed it with selective stories, cherry-picked data, dramatic headlines. You think you are waking up, but you are just sinking deeper into the comfort of being right. Confirmation bias is not just a flaw. It is a vulnerability, and the people who understand it best are the ones trying to sell you something. An idea, a product, a belief, a vote. They do not care if it is true. They care if it sticks, and if it matches your existing beliefs, it sticks like glue. So how do you fight back? You look for friction, not confirmation. If something makes you uncomfortable, pause. That discomfort is a signal, not always because it is wrong, but because it challenges your mental autopilot. You ask yourself, do I believe this because it is true, or because it feels familiar? You start actively seeking out the other side of the argument, not to agree, just to understand, just to see if your belief holds up under pressure. And most importantly, you stay curious. Certainty is comforting, but curiosity is what keeps you awake. You learn to spot the bait. When a post, a video, a headline feels a little too satisfying, too perfect, you ask who benefits from you believing this. What are they trying to make you feel? What are they hoping you do next? Because when someone wants to manipulate you, they will not fight your belief. They will mirror it. They will flatter it, feed it, weaponize it. And if you are not aware of your own bias, you will thank them for it. You will think they are helping you. You will think they are brave. You will call them truth tellers, when really, they are just excellent mirrors, the kind that make you feel smart, even as they steer you. But the moment you see this for what it is, the whole thing starts to crack. You start craving truth more than comfort. You start noticing when your beliefs are being massaged, when your emotions are being triggered, when your certainty is being used against you. And that awareness changes everything. Because now, you are not just reacting. You are observing. You are not just looking for agreement. You are looking for understanding. And that is when your mind becomes harder to exploit. You can still believe what you believe. But now it is yours, not just something someone handed you, because they knew exactly what you wanted to hear. Relabeling Technique. You ever notice how calling something by a different name can completely change how people feel about it? Not because the thing itself changed. Just the label, one small shift in language, and suddenly fear becomes excitement. Manipulation becomes influence. Failure becomes experience. That is not just wordplay. That is a weapon. That is the relabeling technique. You see it everywhere. Politics, marketing, relationships. It is the art of taking something that might trigger resistance and swapping the label so it feels safe, familiar, or even desirable. It is subtle. It is smooth. And when it is done right, you do not even notice it happening. Think about junk food. Nobody wants to eat something labeled unhealthy, artificial, or processed. But call it comfort food. Say it is homestyle. Say it is indulgent. Now it feels nostalgic, emotional, personal. You are not being reckless. You are treating yourself. Same food. Different story. That is relabeling. It changes perception without changing reality, and that tiny shift is enough to override your instincts. This is how companies convince you to spend more, do more, trust more. They do not say surveillance. They say personalized experience. They do not say debt. They say flexible payments. They do not say addictive. They say highly engaging. It is not lying, it is framing. But the emotional result is the same. You let your guard down. Because labels shape how your brain reacts before you even think. Call it a tax and people resist. Call it a contribution and suddenly it sounds noble. Call it a lie and people get angry. Call it a misunderstanding and it sounds like an accident. If someone wants to get you on their side, all they have to do is shift the language just enough to make you feel like agreeing is your idea. Even in arguments, this trick works. You are not angry, you are passionate. You are not being stubborn, you are being principled. You are not wrong, you are just misunderstood. It smooths the edges. It softens the conflict. It creates space for agreement without forcing it. And that is why it is so powerful, because people rarely change their minds when they feel attacked. But they will shift their view when the words around it feel different. Label something dangerous, and people avoid it. Label it as rare or elite, and now they chase it. That is the twist. This trick is not just about calming fear. It can also create desire. Want someone to pay more for a basic experience. Call it premium. Want someone to tolerate a restriction. Call it a policy. Want someone to accept control. Call it structure. You are not being managed. You are being guided. You are not being pressured. You are being encouraged. You are not giving up freedom. You are being protected, and people fall for it constantly. Because language is not neutral. It sets the stage. It tells the brain what to feel before the facts even land. Now here is the part most people miss. Relabeling does not just happen from others. You do it to yourself every day. You wake up tired and say you are unmotivated, so you feel stuck all day. You mess up once and label yourself a failure, so you stop trying. You feel nervous and call it weakness, so you avoid the challenge. But if you change that label, not the situation, just the label, everything shifts. You are not nervous. You are prepared and alert. You are not stuck. You are processing. You are not failing. You are refining. Your brain responds to the story you tell it. So if someone else wants to control how you react, all they have to do is give you a story that feels better than the truth. And if you are not watching for that, you will buy into their version every time. This happens in leadership. Managers do not say, "Do what I say." They say, "I trust your judgment." They do not say you have no choice. They say we are all in this together. And suddenly, the power dynamic feels different even though it did not change. It happens in dating, in advertising, in therapy, in parenting, in cults. Anytime someone wants to lead you somewhere without resistance, they can shift one word and walk you right past your defenses. So how do you fight back? Start by asking this. What would I call this if I was not being influenced? Strip the emotion out. What is this thing really? Is this guidance or control? Is this reward or manipulation? Is this feedback or shame dressed up? Is this opportunity or pressure with glitter on it? Because once you name it accurately, the spell breaks. Relabeling only works when you accept the new label. But if you pause, if you choose your own language, you take the power back. That does not mean you have to reject everything. It just means you decide what things mean for yourself. Not based on someone else's story, not based on what sounds nice, based on what is real. Because the truth does not always feel good, but it is solid. It holds up under pressure. And it cannot be hijacked with a clever phrase. So next time you feel your reaction soften just because something was worded differently, stop. Ask yourself what it would sound like if it were called by its real name. You might be surprised how many things only sound safe because someone gave them a prettier label. Fear of missing out, FOMO. You know that weird pressure you feel when you see other people doing something and you are not part of it. That creeping sensation that maybe you are missing out on something important, something cool, something everyone else seems to know about but you. That is not a random thought. That is fear of missing out, and it is being used against you every single day. It is not just a feeling. It is a trigger. It grabs your attention and hijacks your decision-making. It makes you rush. It makes you commit. It makes you say yes to things you would not even care about if nobody else was doing them. And the wild part is, it works even when you know it is happening. The trick is simple. Show you that other people are doing something. Add a sense of limited access, and make it feel like time is running out. That combination, it lights up the emotional centers of your brain. You stop thinking. You just react. Because deep down, missing out does not just feel like missing fun. It feels like being excluded, left behind, ignored. Humans are wired for connection. We hate being on the outside of the group. That fear is ancient. Evolution built it into us for survival. And now, marketers, influencers, and platforms use that same wiring to push you toward whatever they want. You see it in limited drops, early access offers, secret waitlists, flash sales, tickets almost sold out, only a few left. These are not random phrases. They are engineered to make your brain panic. You might think you are making a rational choice, but in reality, your emotions just got hijacked. Think about how many times you have scrolled through social media and felt behind, like other people are doing more, traveling more, winning more. That is not just you being insecure. That is a curated system built to activate your FOMO every time you open the app, every story, every post. Every highlight reel is a silent message saying this is where the action is and you are not in it. And once that hits, you start chasing. You buy things not because you need them, but because others have them. You go to events not because you care, but because you do not want to be the only one who missed out. You join trends not because they mean something to you, but because you do not want to be left behind. This is how FOMO becomes a control tool. It shifts your motivation from internal to external. Instead of doing what matters to you, you start doing what will keep you in the loop. You become reactive, easily led, vulnerable to suggestion. All someone has to do is imply that you might miss out, and you are hooked. Want to sell more of a product? Say only the first 100 buyers get the bonus. Want to get people to sign up for something fast? Say spots are closing soon. Want to make a basic offer feel exclusive? Call it a members-only deal. It is the same technique, over and over. Create the illusion that not acting means losing something special. And suddenly, people stop asking if they even want the thing. They just panic about not getting it. It works because it hits on something primal. When we believe a door is closing, we rush to get through it, even if we are not sure what is on the other side. That panic is not logic. That is raw emotion, and it is exactly what companies and platforms are counting on. The most dangerous part is that it often does not feel like pressure. It feels like urgency, like relevance, like something you need to do right now, so you act fast. And once you say yes, you justify it. You convince yourself it was a good idea. You turn the trick into a story that makes sense. But the truth is, the decision started with fear. And here is the kicker. Most of the time, you are not missing anything. That trip you skipped, probably not life-changing. That flash sale, the same product will be on another sale next week. That event you did not go to, it looked better in pictures. But your brain does not care. Once FOMO is triggered, it overrides your logic. So how do you stop falling for it? Start by noticing the signs. Ask yourself, would I still want this if nobody else had it? Would I still go if I had never seen anyone post about it? Would I still care if it were not disappearing soon? If the answer is no, you are not chasing value. You are reacting to fear. Real confidence is built on doing what matters to you, not what everyone else seems to be doing. That means being okay with missing things. It means choosing depth over constant novelty. It means calling out the trick when you see it instead of falling for it again and again. Because here is the truth. Most of the things you are afraid to miss do not actually move your life forward, but the pressure to keep up. That steals your attention, your energy, and your peace of mind. Once you realize that missing out is not a threat, it becomes freedom. You are no longer chasing every shiny thing. You are choosing what actually matters. And no fake urgency can manipulate someone who already knows where they are going. Pseudo-expert confidence. There is a certain kind of confidence that shuts your brain down the moment you hear it. That voice that sounds like it knows what it is talking about. That tone that makes you feel like you should not question what was just said. And a lot of the time, that confidence has nothing to do with real knowledge. It is a performance, and it is called pseudo-expert confidence. This is one of the most dangerous psychological tricks out there. Not because it is loud or aggressive, but because it is convincing, because it looks and sounds like credibility, even when there is nothing behind it. And the human brain is wired to confuse confidence with competence. You hear someone speak clearly, firmly, with zero hesitation, and your subconscious starts filling in the blanks. They must know what they are talking about. Why else would they sound so sure? But here is the twist. The more certain someone sounds, the more you believe them, even when they are dead wrong, even when they are making it up. And people have been using that to their advantage forever. Think about how often you have seen someone confidently explain a topic they barely understand. They dress the part. They use buzzwords. They drop random facts with no context. But because they never flinch, never pause, never admit doubt, everyone else just nods along. The room falls into silence. And the few people who do know better, they hesitate. They second, guess themselves, because that kind of fake authority is intimidating. That is the trick. Pseudo-experts win by pushing real experts into silence. This shows up in business, in politics, in health advice, in self-help influencers. You see people online who look the part, sound the part, and sell themselves as experts on everything from finance to fitness to psychology. And because they speak with unwavering certainty, they attract followers, clients, fans. Not because they are right, but because they sound right. And the moment you buy into that confidence, they have you. You stop asking hard questions. You stop checking sources. You stop comparing information. You start trusting their delivery more than the data itself. And that is exactly what they want. Now here is why this works so well. Most people hate uncertainty. It makes them feel exposed. It makes them feel like they are falling behind. So when someone comes along who sounds absolutely sure about something you are unsure about, it is comforting. even when it is false, especially when it is false. That confidence creates a psychological shortcut. Your brain sees it as a signal to relax, to stop analyzing, to trust the speaker. It is not logic, it is emotion. It is comfort disguised as clarity, and it is exactly how people get manipulated without ever realizing it. You want an example? Look at the rise of financial gurus on social media. They tell you exactly what to invest in, what to avoid, how to get rich quick. And they say it with so much certainty that people pour their savings into things they do not understand. Not because the advice makes sense, but because the delivery feels bulletproof. Meanwhile, actual economists, actual experts, speak with nuance. They say it depends. They highlight risks. They acknowledge uncertainty. But to the average person, that kind of honesty sounds weak compared to the manufactured confidence of a pseudo-expert. And that is the sick part. The people who know the most often sound the least certain, because they know how complex things really are. But the people who know just enough to be dangerous, they are the ones who stand on stage, chest out, voice steady, eye contact locked, telling you how the world works in 3 simple steps. It is not just about facts. It is about delivery. Someone can be completely wrong and still persuade an entire room just by sounding sure of themselves. And once you realize that, you start to see it everywhere. You see how often confidence is weaponized to cover for ignorance. You see how easily people follow the loudest voice in the room instead of the most informed. So how do you protect yourself from this? You stop mistaking confidence for truth. You start listening for what is not being said. Are they explaining both sides? Are they acknowledging complexity? Are they open to being wrong? Because if someone cannot say I do not know, or that is a complicated question, that is not expertise. That is performance. And the more polished the performance, the more skeptical you should be. You also start trusting your discomfort. If something feels too clean, too easy, too perfectly packaged, it probably is. Real answers are messy. Real knowledge takes work. Real experts are humble. And anyone who claims to have all the answers is either lying or selling something. This does not mean you have to question everything. It means you pay attention to how the message is delivered, not just what it says. Because manipulation does not always come from lies. Sometimes it comes from fake certainty, from the illusion of authority. And the moment you fall for that, you are no longer thinking. You are following. And the scariest part, pseudo-experts do not just fool others. They often fool themselves. The longer they act confident, the more they start to believe they really are experts. And that creates a feedback loop. They get louder, bolder, more dangerous, because now they are selling advice with full conviction and zero reflection. So next time you hear someone speaking like they know everything about everything, do not be impressed. Be alert. Real knowledge whispers, ego shouts, and in a world full of noise, your job is to know the difference. Reframing loss as gain. You do not need to change the truth to change the way people feel about it. You just need to reframe it. Same reality, different angle. And suddenly, what looked like a loss starts to feel like a win. This is not about lying. It is about manipulating perception. And it works because of how your brain is wired to respond to pain versus reward. This trick shows up everywhere, especially when someone needs you to accept something that feels negative. A price increase, a downgrade, a compromise. Instead of telling you what you are losing, they flip the frame. They present it as a gain, a reward, a positive shift. And if it is packaged right, your brain goes along with it. Here is how that works in real life. Say a company raises prices. They could say the product now costs $10 more. But that sounds like a loss. So instead, they say the new version comes with bonus features, or premium access, or added protection. Nothing has changed except the way they are describing it. You are still paying more. But because it feels like you are getting more, your resistance drops. That shift in language activates a different part of your brain. It bypasses the part that hates losing and lights up the part that craves progress. And once that happens, your logical brain takes a backseat. Emotion takes the wheel. You see this all the time in politics. When rights are taken away, they are rarely framed as restrictions. They are framed as protections. When public programs are cut, it is not pitched as losing support. It is positioned as promoting independence. Leaders know that if they tell you the raw truth, you will fight it. But if they dress it up as a gain, you might even support it. And this is not new. This comes straight from the way our minds process value. We are loss averse. Losing something hurts twice as much as gaining something of the same size feels good. So if someone wants to control how you react, all they have to do is reshape the loss into a gain. Even when nothing is actually gained, a 30-minute delay is not an inconvenience. It is a chance to prepare. A canceled feature is not a downgrade. It is a simplified experience. A 15% smaller product is not a rip-off. It is a more eco-friendly version. You think you are being informed, but you are being redirected, nudged away from anger and toward acceptance. And the real trick, they do not need to change the facts, just the context. Imagine two doctors. One tells you there is a 10% chance of dying. The other tells you there is a 90% chance of surviving. Same data, but the second one feels safer, feels smarter, feels like a better option. That is reframing. It shapes emotion, and emotion drives decisions. Now apply that to every sales pitch you have ever heard. Instead of saying you will lose money if you do not act, they say you will save money if you do. Instead of saying you missed out, they say you are just in time for the next opportunity. It is always about where they want your focus. Pain or gain, loss or benefit. And because your brain is always scanning for pain, they make sure you never quite see it. Even in relationships, this trick plays out. When someone lets you down, they reframe it as a growth opportunity. When they back out of a promise, they tell you it is because they care about your future. They are not wrong, but they are not neutral either. They are managing your emotional response by controlling the lens. This is what makes the trick so powerful. It is subtle. You do not feel pushed. You feel reassured. And that comfort is what makes you agree. Buy in. Say yes. Because if they had just told you what you were losing, you would have pushed back. You would have walked away. But by painting the same situation as progress, they keep you engaged. And once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. You start spotting it in product labels, corporate emails, marketing campaigns, even apologies. You notice how often the word opportunity gets used to describe bad news. How often inconvenience is framed as an upgrade. How often someone spins a setback into a feature. And here is where it gets real. The people doing this are not always malicious. Sometimes they are just trying to keep you calm, avoid conflict, smooth things over. But that does not make it harmless. Because when you are constantly being reframed away from reality, you lose your grip on what is actually happening. You stop noticing the losses because they have been hidden under layers of positive language. And that leaves you wide open to being taken advantage of. So how do you protect yourself? Start by asking the harder question. What am I actually gaining here? What am I actually losing? Forget how it was framed. Look at the raw math, the actual change, not the narrative built around it. If it feels too good for something that started bad, dig deeper. Odds are the loss is still there. It has just been dressed up. Because in a world full of clever framing, clarity is power. When you can see past the spin, you stop reacting emotionally. You stop being steered. You start making decisions based on truth, not illusion. And that is something no amount of clever wording can control. Eye-level shelf placement. You walk into a store thinking you are in control. You believe you are choosing what you want. But most of the time, the store has already made the first move. Before you even realize it, they have placed exactly what they want you to buy right in front of your eyes. Literally. This is the trick of eye-level shelf placement, and it works better than almost any sales tactic out there. Here is the wild part. You probably think you browse, that you scan the shelves, compare options, think it through. But your brain is lazy, not because you are stupid, because it is efficient. It wants to conserve energy. So when you look straight ahead and see something perfectly positioned, your brain takes it as a shortcut, a default, a signal that this is probably the best or most popular option, and you grab it without realizing you were nudged. This trick is not accidental. It is engineered. The most profitable items, the ones the store or brand wants you to buy the most, are placed exactly at eye level. Not your eye level specifically, but the average. If the target customer is an adult, the sweet spot is between 4 and 5 feet. If it is a kid, say in the cereal aisle, the sugar, loaded boxes with the cartoon characters are placed lower, right at the child's eye line. That is not marketing. That is psychological targeting. And here is the shock. You are not paying for the product. You are paying for the position. Brands compete and pay huge amounts just to get their item placed at eye level. It is called slotting. It is not about quality. It is not about taste. It is about visibility. If it is in your face, it sells. If it is below your knees or above your head, it gets ignored. You think you are avoiding ads by skipping commercials. But this is an ad you cannot skip. It is built into the way you move through the world, into how your eyes scan a shelf, into how your brain is trained to think what is easiest to grab must be the best choice. And it does not stop with grocery stores. Pharmacies do it. Retail chains do it. Even online shops do it. Ever notice how Amazon lists a sponsored product first, but does not always make it obvious it is paid for? That is eye level in digital form. Same psychological effect. The higher it is on the page, the more likely you are to trust it, click it, and buy it. This is about more than just convenience. It is about invisible influence. Your decisions are being shaped by positioning long before logic kicks in. You feel like you are deciding, but the options have been stacked against you. Now, to be clear, this does not mean you are being scammed. It means you are being steered. And most people have no idea how much of their daily behavior is being nudged by things as simple as height, placement, and visual proximity. You reach for what is easy to see, what takes the least effort, what feels obvious. And the moment it feels obvious, you stop questioning it. Even color plays into this. Bright packaging, bold fonts, red price tags. They all catch your attention faster. Combine that with strategic placement, and now the product is not just in your line of sight. It is in your mind. Before you can even decide why you picked it up, your brain has already made peace with the purchase. That is why the healthiest products are often hidden. The generics, the cheaper brands, the less profitable options. You will find them buried on the bottom row or shoved up on the top shelf where you have to strain to see them. Not because they are worse, but because they do not pay to be seen. The entire layout is a sales pitch disguised as a layout. The store is not organized for your benefit. It is organized for your behavior. Every shelf is a silent persuasion tool. And here is what makes it even more powerful. You do not remember any of this. Your memory edits out the manipulation. You walk out thinking you made a smart choice, that it was your idea. And that illusion of free will. That is what makes the trick so effective. You cannot resist what you do not even notice. So next time you find yourself reaching out for something without really thinking, pause. Ask yourself why that item is the first thing you saw. Ask yourself what is hiding one shelf below or 2 rows above. You might find a better deal, a better product, a better option that was just a little bit harder to see. Because the real game is not about giving you choices. It is about directing your attention. And once they have your attention, they already have your money. Repetition in design UX loops. Ever noticed how some apps feel addictive without doing anything exciting? You open them without thinking. Scroll, tap, close. Then reopen 5 minutes later, and you are not even sure why. That is not an accident. That is repetition in design. And it is one of the most invisible yet powerful psychological loops built into your daily life. It is called a UX loop. UX means user experience. And the loop is the part that hooks you. Not with variety, not with complexity, but with subtle, predictable repetition. Same button placement, same colors. Same swipe action, same animations. Over and over, until your brain stops questioning it and starts craving it. That repetition builds what feels like comfort, familiarity, flow. You stop noticing the design, which is exactly what they want. Because when your brain is on autopilot, you are not resisting. You are not analyzing. You are just reacting. Just obeying the rhythm they set for you. And that rhythm is incredibly calculated. The app rewards you in tiny, consistent ways. A red dot here, a heart icon there, a small sound when you complete something. That is a loop, and it is not just pleasing. It is reinforcing. Your brain gets a micro hit of satisfaction, just enough to want it again and again. Designers do not need to make every interaction special. In fact, the more predictable the design, the more effective the loop. The more familiar it feels, the more likely you are to trust it. And the more you trust it, the more time you spend in it. Let that sink in. The design is not just about looking good. It is about building a habit, a digital habit that feeds itself. You are not staying because you are entertained. You are staying because the loop keeps pulling you forward. Smoothly. Silently. Now here is where it gets even more manipulative. The repetition is often paired with anticipation. Something might change. Something might update. A new message. A new like. A new offer. But only if you refresh. Only if you scroll. So you do, again and again. Just like pulling a lever. The loop stays the same, but the reward changes slightly. Just enough to keep you in it. That is not attention. That is conditioning. Think about Instagram. You swipe, tap, scroll, swipe again, nothing new. Then suddenly, a new notification, dopamine spike, loop reinforced, or YouTube. You watch one short, then another, then another. The motion is identical every time, just a single thumb movement. But the repetition is hypnotic, and the interface never breaks that pattern. It wants your mind to flow in that exact direction. This happens on shopping sites too. Add to cart. pop-up confirms it. Back to scrolling. Add another pop-up. You feel progress. You feel control. But it is just the loop rewarding you for staying inside it. The repetition makes the interaction feel frictionless, and when there is no friction, there is no pause, no questioning, just buying. And it is not just apps, your car dashboard, your smart TV, even your fridge interface. All are designed around behavioral repetition. One button always on the same side. Same color, same reaction. The more you repeat it, the more second nature it becomes, until your behavior is no longer a choice. It is a response. Repetition dulls resistance. That is the core principle behind it. The longer you stay inside the loop, the less likely you are to leave it, and that gives designers enormous control over your time, your energy, and your attention. Even when the app seems boring, the repetition keeps it sticky. It gives your brain a rhythm, a beat, a predictable loop you do not want to interrupt. Now here is the dangerous part. Because the design feels invisible, it feels harmless. But what it is really doing is hijacking your behavioral system, the system that runs on cues and routines. The same one that powers habits like brushing your teeth or locking your door. Except now, that system is being rerouted into your phone, your screen, your digital habits, and breaking that loop. Almost impossible if you are not aware of it. Because the repetition does not make the experience better. It just makes it harder to leave. So what can you do? Start by paying attention to how you interact. Are you choosing to open that app? Or are you just repeating a motion? Are you enjoying what you are doing? Or are you just looping through it? Once you bring conscious awareness into the pattern, you weaken the loop. Ask yourself what would happen if the interface suddenly changed. Would you pause? Would you get annoyed? That is how deeply the repetition has trained your behavior. And the goal here is not to fear design. It is to see it for what it is, a system built on patterns, repeated actions, subtle reinforcements, not to help you, but to keep you. Repetition in design is not lazy. It is strategic. It shapes your habits without your permission. And once you are in the loop, it does not need to shout. It just needs to stay the same. Because the longer it stays the same, the more automatic you become.